The girl felt amazing that warm, sunny morning, with birds chirping in the leaves, sparkling in the sunlight. The other maids were celebrating finishing the laundry at last, and complaining about their stiff backs. Another one bragged that she'd bulked up a little these past few days, adding that their job was harder than blacksmithing. Then, feeling totally drained, they decided to take a short break, because if they went right back, they'd just get swamped again. That's when they noticed Princess Grace walking by, the one everyone in the empire thought was so beautiful. The girls wondered how happy the king must be to have a daughter, since she could wear whatever clothes she wanted. But Siana didn't think Grace was pretty, noting that her dresses were clearly the wrong size, like 40 pounds too big. The girl explained it was like dressing a baby piglet, and suspected she was in serious pain wearing that corset. It looked like someone had wrapped the princess in a steel cable by force, and she still had to walk around and smile. The maids were amazed she could tell all that, but she didn't admit that just a few months ago, she was a princess herself. When she was born, her mom was the queen, her dad was the king, and she was little Princess Siana Assalan von Salite. Like any other princess, she thought she'd lucked out in life. But her mom died when she was only 10. Her dad decided to remarry to strengthen the kingdom, and Siana really missed her mom and felt super lonely. Her stepmom announced that, in the late queen's name, she'd do everything she could to make the girl a proper princess. And as Siana got her education, she was bullied a lot. Her stepmom thought she was way too dumb for her age. Then the queen declared that from now on, for every mistake the princess made, she'd be punished with the whip. Siana tried her best, but because of the corset and the super heavy dress, she couldn't bow properly to greet her stepmom. She felt like she was about to die, but she didn't give up. But once again, she messed up the bow, and the queen saw it as disobedience. The queen said the princess was a pain in the butt, and declared she had no right to call herself a princess, and that the king couldn't take her to banquets. She also explained that it was all for the good of their kingdom, so the little girl shouldn't be mad or angry at her. She raised the whip to strike the girl, but stopped cold when the king walked in. The princess silently begged him for help, but he just said the queen wasn't wrong to discipline a kid who's slacking off. Siana felt lost and betrayed in that moment. She couldn't believe she was to blame for all this. All she wanted was to be happy, but she was done being a princess and just wanted out. She dreamed of escaping, remembering her mom, but knew she had to endure it all until she turned 18. By then, their castle had fallen to another kingdom, the conqueror of the entire continent. Soon, the infamous blood prince, Rasheed Leizuan, showed up, the first prince of the Leizuan Empire. He announced that they hadn't answered his letter demanding surrender, so he came in person. Then, he asked if they'd surrender to him. Siana figured this was her shot. If they gave up, they wouldn't die. But the king declared he wasn't about to serve some low-life invader, demanding they just kill him now. In that instant, Prince Rasheed lopped his head clean off, declaring they were the first who refused to bow. And get this, he'd planned to spare them, kill no one. But the whole thing was so boring, it didn't even faze him. Then the princess saw him heading her way. But she didn't want to die, she was still just a kid. She couldn't believe it was ending like this, and she fell to his feet, begging for help, saying she'd do anything. Rasheed figured she was offering herself as a wife, but Siana insisted she was nowhere near ready for that, and had nothing feminine about her. She even said she couldn't compare to the kingdom's top beauties. And although she looked fearless, she really just wanted to survive. Next, the girl explained that she was super healthy, could embroider, and brew a delicious, fragrant tea. After saying all that, the princess declared she could be the perfect maid for the prince. Afterwards, even she couldn't believe she'd spouted such ridiculous nonsense. And then she looked at the prince and noticed how handsome he was. Everyone said he was the greatest warrior on the continent, but Siana decided he was just using his charm. Rasheed noticed then that her face was round and soft, like a bun made from the purest wheat flour. Then he finally agreed to let the princess work as a servant in the imperial palace, and ordered her to be untied. The girl was overjoyed to have survived this hellhole. Then she thanked the prince and introduced herself by name. She also assured him that she would never forget his kindness, while he was thinking about how he'd picked a cutie. So Siana became a servant in the imperial palace, though she could get bummed out, wondering how she'd gotten so unlucky. But now, thanks to her, fresh bread was baked, clothes were getting clean, and the garden was becoming even more beautiful. Before, she had to wear a corset that squeezed her body all day and smile like a doll. Now her life was completely different, and Siana even found it more fun and much more comfortable being a servant, which she thought was great. Now the girl wanted to be a maid for the rest of her life, and for the sake of cleanliness, she often did things even when she wasn't asked. The other maids figured she was trying to suck up to the senior maids, and explained that she had to ask what to do first. Mostly, it was this servant girl named Jean who was pissed, telling Siana she was just a slave from a conquered country anyway. She also made it clear this girl would never make the main maid squad, and always treated her like dirt. That's when another one, Choo Choo, walked in and yelled at Jean for picking on the slow workers instead of helping out. She also threatened the screamer, saying if she kept it up, she'd report her to the head maids. Jean backed down then, but told Choo Choo she could keep playing around with these know-nothing kids. Then she dumped a bucket of water and told Siana she could keep doing what she loved best: cleaning. After that, everyone scattered, and Jean, who was left, advised the newbie to fight back. She explained they only messed with her because she took it silently, but Siana had no clue others were even bothering her. See, for the former princess who'd been bullied her whole life by the new queen, this kind of grumbling seemed kinda sweet. Now, the girl understood they were showing her disrespect, and Choo Choo shared that, considering her family, fighting back wouldn't be easy. She knew that girl was from a respected family in the kingdom, so whatever she did, she was basically guaranteed to become a maid. The other two trainees are also trying to get something out of Jean, which is why they're always following her around. So she just chills, hoping they'll pick her based on her family. But Choo Choo was just as much a trainee as Siana. She's got a strong, solid build, which makes her one of the more promising trainees. Plus, she doesn't have family connections to fall back on, so there's no guarantee she'll officially become a maid. Jean understood that Siana had nowhere else to go either, and yet somehow, she'd become a maid trainee. That meant someone helped her, and the princess figured it was the emperor of this country. Or maybe it was because, forgetting her princess's honor, the girl had bowed to the floor and begged for mercy. Siana thought that in that moment, she'd seemed pathetic or ridiculous to Rasheed, that he didn't sympathize with her at all, and it was just a whim. But she couldn't admit all that to Jean, so she just claimed that no one had helped her. Just then, Sul, the emperor's personal guard, walked in and saw him playing with his little critters. The emperor himself was stunning, with an angelic face that captivated everyone who laid eyes on him. He even mesmerized enemies on the battlefield. Sul, having grown up with him, knew this all too well. He asked the guard how that girl was doing, and Sul reported that she was doing fine. He added that Siana wasn't used to physical labor, so she's a bit lost, but she's smart and learns fast. Still, it'll take time for her to become an official maid. Sul wondered why Rasheed was so worried about her. He didn't even know himself. He figured he just felt sorry for her, since he destroyed her country and killed her family. The guard was surprised. He'd destroyed so many lives, so why was he even thinking about it now? Then Sul asked the emperor to be honest and admit that he's always been into girls like that. Small, with big eyes, and seemingly harmless. And it was true. Rasheed, the so-called bloody emperor, this cruel and handsome man just adored animals. Sul was still blown away every time he saw it, and the emperor admitted Siana did have something similar to them. He even said he hoped she'd become an official maid, and they'd find her a good position. But Sul argued, you can't just promote a maid trainee whose skills haven't been proven to full-fledged maid status. Rasheed agreed, and decided they should test her abilities themselves to see if she had any potential. The maids headed to lunch, which was meatless again, but Siana said they shouldn't be focused on proper eating etiquette. She claimed they could eat as much as they wanted now, but the others figured she thought that way, because she was from another country. Siana also thought it wasn't necessary to keep up a conversation, so this place and position seemed like paradise to her. Jean even joked, asking how she could eat such garbage, and the girl realized she was being made fun of again. Siana figured she should cry after words like that, but she just kept a straight face. Jean didn't get what was up with this girl, and why she thought everything was normal, saying it wouldn't make her cool. Choo Choo thought that girl, being from another country, should worry more, and then yelled at the grump for always picking on the quiet one. But Jean pointed out that she'd defended her before, then reminded her that she was in charge and to pay attention to the vibe. Then they got into this back and forth that reminded Sian of a grizzly bear wrestling a hyena. Just then, Miss Lip, the etiquette instructor, walked in and immediately asked what was going on. Seeing two students arguing, the two of them instantly clammed up, and Lip ordered them not to cause trouble in front of her, no matter how bad they wanted to fight. Then she announced that an official document had come from above, and that a tea ceremony would be held in a few days. All the students, along with Lip, would be serving the guests who came, and it was important to follow strict etiquette and not make mistakes. A maid from the main staff would also be working with them, but the girls started wondering who would be at the tea ceremony. They guessed it would be the wife of some big-shot aristocrat, or maybe a beautiful princess from a neighboring country. But Lip explained that it was women who grow fruit for delivery to the palace who were coming. The fruit they've been growing for the palace for years now is seriously incredible, and this tea ceremony is to show our gratitude. Plus, there's training in the morning before the tea party. so everyone needs to meet in the garden right after they wake up, and Siana was stoked she got picked for this gig. Jean, though, was pissed she had to wait on some old biddies, and thought this job was perfect for the newbie. Then she snarked that Siana wouldn't even be at the reception if it wasn't to service those ladies. The ex-princess understood that those ladies were just working class, which is why they trusted maids to serve them. It didn't require special care. Otherwise, they'd have sent the official maids to the reception. But it still seemed weird. The next morning, Lip started teaching the apprentices tea etiquette. And first of all, they can't forget they're in the imperial palace. The girls gotta learn this right, so they don't embarrass the imperial family. Choo-Choo was happy that even though the official work hasn't started yet, she was already allowed to try herself as a maid. She said she'd give it her all, but worried her drive and skill levels might not match up. Then she started pouring tea, and Lip corrected her, reminding her not to splash drops everywhere. The other trainees teased her, calling her a muscle-bound idiot, saying tea wasn't the beer her minor dad drinks. Choo-Choo got angry at the other trainees for saying that, and she was also bummed about getting scolded by the teacher. Next up was Jean's turn to pour tea, and she did everything perfectly and neatly, earning praise from the teacher. The girl was thrilled about it, since she'd been taught by a famous etiquette instructor from the capital. Lip thought Jean wasn't the kind of person who should even be a trainee maid. Plus, rumors were going around that she'd become the head maid and serve Her Majesty the Empress. Siana herself saw that she did okay, but figured it was only for a first-timer and still just at a trainee maid level. Back when the carefully selected maids made even the smallest mistake, the queen would punish them immediately. These maids, trying to soothe the Empress's bad mood, poured and served tea with more finesse than any noble lady. Compared to what Siana had seen before, everyone here seemed clumsy and awkward. Now it was her turn to practice pouring tea. And for now, that was enough. She wasn't a princess anymore. Not wanting to stand out because of her past, she poured tea slowly and deliberately, but with a hint of clumsiness. Siana really wanted to stay in the palace, and she knew she had to be quiet to do it. After afternoon training, the trainees had to go to their assigned places and do the work they couldn't do in the morning. That meant cleaning the palace, stoking fires, and washing dishes. But everyone managed. Then they brought out a snack made from leftover bread, considered a treat for the starving trainee maids. Siana was grateful, thinking it was worth working in the kitchen for this, and was glad they'd been assigned here. Suddenly, she noticed Choo-Choo acting strange today and barely talking, so she offered her some food. So, she asked the former princess if it was tough learning from the maids. Siana said they weren't really harsh, and admitted she was even a little jealous. The princess remembered that Choo-Choo got the most flack during the tea lesson today, which is probably why she was so upset. Before, this student was always praised, but today was the first time this happened, and she took it way too hard. Turns out, this was also Choo-Choo's first real test, and she admitted Jean was right, and she'd never actually had tea. Plus, she has zero experience that could help her, and everyone noticed she was the worst at it. Now, Choo-Choo was scared the guests would be mad at her, and Siana decided she had to help this girl out. So, she offered to practice together every day during their break, just the two of them. Choo-Choo was thrilled, hoping she'd teach her everything, and thought she was incredibly kind. After that, they started practicing every night, and Siana explained that first, you gotta boil the right amount of water. All right, next you gotta throw a spoonful of tea leaves into the warmed-up teapot, and then immediately pour boiling water over them. After that, strain it through a tea strainer. And I should mention, to become a pro at this stuff, you need a ton of practice. Over time, Choo-Choo was getting better. Not perfect yet, but she wasn't messing up the order or spilling tea anymore. Siana was now relieved that Choo-Choo definitely wouldn't be accused of mistreating the guests, and not a drop would go to waste. Choo-Choo thanked her friend for the lessons, thinking that Siana had taught her way better than the other maids ever could. But the former princess modestly explained that Choo-Choo herself was trying hard. That's why she was improving, because she's a diligent student. Also, during their training sessions, they became pretty close, and Choo-Choo told her partner a lot about herself. She confessed that she's from a mining town in the east, and her dad's a miner who works every single day. He has to feed 13 kids, which surprised Siana. And Choo-Choo added that they're a really close-knit family, but it's tough for them to make ends meet, which is why she applied for the maid job, to help her dad out. She admitted official maids got paid way better, and she wanted her little siblings to eat meat every day. Then Choo-Choo started asking Siana how she ended up here, figuring her story was probably complicated since she came from overseas. That's when the girl confessed she used to be a princess of a tiny kingdom, and the crown prince assigned her here. He explained he felt bad for her, since she'd lost her country and her parents. Choo-Choo couldn't believe Siana was talking about the Rasheed, the bloodthirsty prince who never lost a fight. Even more unbelievable was that a former princess had actually met him. Siana suddenly remembered overhearing stories from the maids as she walked by. and realized he was a big deal. The girls whispered that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince was even more stunning than a statue. They gushed about how his silver hair shimmered in the sunlight, and his violet eyes were as bright as the Milky Way. Then, Chuchu confessed to the princess she just dreamed of seeing the prince, and Siana confirmed he really was gorgeous. Then she wanted to know if he really was a cold-hearted bastard. Despite being so damn good-looking, Siana confirmed it too, saying he'd wiped out her entire family. And that's when Chuchu apologized for blurting that out without thinking. The princess still couldn't bring herself to talk about her true feelings and insisted she was fine, since those people had made her life hell. But then Chuchu was like, "No way, that's messed up." She couldn't believe she was okay with it, considering the prince murdered her whole family. But Siana just repeated herself, explaining that it had been a long time, so there was no reason to get so worked up about it. Chuchu still knew she was only saying that to keep her from feeling guilty. She also pointed out that the former princess was super kind, then hugged her and repeated it a few more times. From that day on, Siana's attitude toward her friend totally changed, and Chuchu started treating her differently too. One evening while cleaning up, Jean snuck up on the princess, trying to scare her, but Chuchu stepped in front of her like a mama bear, warning her not to even think about saying anything out of line to Siana. If Jean disobeys, the protector threatened to stretch her face like cheese and wrap it around a pole. She got freaked out, but immediately started making excuses, saying she just wanted to know what time it was, and left. Besides, Chuchu always brought Siana food for no reason, and urged her to eat, saying she still needed to grow. She mostly got the princess sweets, explaining that they were way sweeter and tastier than crusty bread. At the same time, Chuchu hated the prince for leaving the little girl without a family, and thought he was a total scumbag. The maid wished all sorts of bad things on him. Mostly it sounded childish, but she said it with all her heart. Siana even felt a little sorry for the crown prince, who she hated. But it was also nice to have someone on her side. Anyway, since he's in such a high position, he probably hears people bad-mouthing him a bunch of times every day. At that moment, Rashid received a letter from Baroness Appleton, and Soul asked him what was wrong, noticing the prince scratching himself. But he just explained that his ear was itchy, and even remembered the superstition that someone was scolding him at that very moment. Soul shot that down, saying if that were true, the prince would have been rolling around on the floor for years, scratching his ears raw. Then he noticed a chipmunk munching on an apple, and remarked that it must taste pretty good. Rashid agreed, saying the Appletons had the best apples, and the guard pointed out those farmers never got an invite to the palace to be thanked. Then he suggested the emperor throw a reception. Plus, he could use it as an excuse to check out Siana. The prince liked that idea and decided to reward the guard by letting him play with his adorable pets for half a day. Saul still refused, and Rashid declared he just didn't understand how cute his little darlings were. Then, he read a letter and shared with the guard that the Baroness would also be happy to join the tea party. The maids went through all kinds of training because the imperial family's status couldn't be lowered by a servant's mistake. At the same time, they had to clean up the uneven lawn and arrange the tables based on the number of guests. On top of everything, Siana added hydrangeas she'd cut that morning, so it wouldn't look too monotonous. After that, she decided to enjoy the view for a bit, and Chuchu filled her in on the gossip. She confessed that it wasn't just farmers coming to the tea party, but also Baroness Appleton, the owner of the orchard. Now, Siana understood why everyone was so hyped up. Besides the guests, they wanted to impress the Baroness. The girls also noticed Jean looked extra gorgeous today, even switched up her jewelry and makeup. Chuchu thought it looked kinda trashy, and Siana doubted that would impress the Baroness. Her friend guessed it was because this was Jean's first guest, then admitted she dolled herself up a little too. She was also worried about everything going smoothly, but Siana told her not to sweat it, since she taught her to be a maid for a reason. There wasn't much time left before the doors opened and the guests arrived, and the maids braced themselves to greet them. The guests were surprised that this was the imperial palace. One of them even wore her best dress. After the greetings, the maid trainees led the guests to the table, but Jean remained standing still. The other girls couldn't figure out why she was being so extra, but they had a hunch she was trying to score points with the Baroness. Even while serving, the place reeked of high society, and the guests were already gossiping about the maids. Still, the banquet couldn't start until everyone arrived, and the Baroness herself showed up last. The trainees were stoked when they saw her, especially Jean, because the Baroness was seriously gorgeous. A maid instantly rushed over, giving her the VIP treatment and thanking her for gracing them with her presence. Jean's face went totally psycho for a split second from the nerves, and she knew that anyone who saw it would bolt. She managed to keep it together though, and asked the madame to follow her, then led her to her reserved spot. Xian caught a whiff of a sweet, expensive rose scent coming from Appleton, even though she thought they were just some backwater nobles. The ex-princess also noticed that this woman was seriously stunning. She'd always wondered what the Baroness looked like. And now she was even a little jealous of Jean. The other guests noticed another arrival, but Siana couldn't quite make out who it was yet. But she soon saw a hunched-over old woman approaching, so hideous that nobody wanted to serve her. The banquet still hadn't started, waiting for the last guest. So Siana went over and greeted the old woman. The girl understood that no guest could be ignored, and then offered to escort her to a table. Each table seated 3 or 4 guests, and they were served by a single maid. And after all the guests were seated, it was announced that the imperial banquet could now begin. The guests chatted about being in the imperial palace, even though it seemed like a normal tea party. They even admitted, thinking they'd spend their lives picking apples and never experience this kind of luxury. Siana overheard their conversation and realized they were just talking about everyday stuff. There was no talk of state affairs, which made the atmosphere pretty chill. But the ex-princess was all about service and soon presented the guests with their dessert for the day. Popping the lid, she explained it was chocolate made from Kana cocoa and suggested they just eat it and savor the flavor. The ladies were surprised they were being served chocolate usually reserved for royalty. Apparently, it's so sweet. Even the prince himself would stop complaining once he tasted it. Then the women started chatting about the dessert, each popping a piece into their mouths. Immediately, a pleasant wave of sweetness washed over them, and they realized it was unbelievably delicious. The chocolate just melted in their mouths, and they started worrying that the sweetness was disappearing so fast. Siana knew that for first-timers trying chocolate, that kind of reaction was totally normal. The ex-princess also noticed that the old woman had quickly finished her dessert and was now just wiping the remnants from around her mouth. Then, a maid approached her and offered a napkin, understanding she was uncomfortable because she'd also gotten it all over her hands. The girl offered to get her something else, but she just turned away, refusing. Then the other guests remembered they had handkerchiefs too and started offering them up. They also figured that the maids, used to serving noble ladies, must feel awkward waiting on the likes of them. But Siana explained everything was fine, that they were all her honored guests, and then asked them to enjoy the tea party. After that, the girl offered to pour the ladies some Ingrid's Earl Grey, hoping they'd like it. But she also added that if they preferred something else, they should feel free to let her know. The guests agreed and were soon tasting the delicious tea, realizing it was the kind the royal family drank. Then, one of the ladies couldn't quite put her finger on what made this tea different from what she drank at home, and the old woman explained that to really understand the taste of food or drink, you had to take small bites or sips. The ladies also understood that the Baroness was the only one who knew that, but also knew that she was the guest of honor today. So, Siana figured not everyone knew the Baroness and decided to clarify. And they explained Appleton Namjik had recently gotten married. One lady added that she definitely hadn't been on the farm before because she'd never seen her, but she'd heard the Baron fell head over heels for her at first sight, since she really is gorgeous. Now, Siana understood Jean was going to have to listen closely to this guest and not screw things up, because if she pisses her off, the whole party's going to be ruined. And that old grump was just stoked to finally have the most important guest in front of her. Jean was a merchant's daughter and believed it was her duty to serve someone like the Baroness. Then she offered Appleton chocolate from the Imperial Palace, explaining it was top-tier stuff and worth a try. But the Baroness just kept sitting there, eyeing the dessert, and then asked how long the maid was planning to ignore her. Appleton also added that Jean's snooty greeting and the look she was giving her felt like she was being covered in dirt. She was even putting up with the sight of the dessert, and then she declared the maid had poured her tea terribly. After that, the Baroness wanted to know how long she had to put up with such rudeness, and Jean just offered to pour her more tea. The maid was sure she hadn't messed anything up. She'd trained with a noble family, and the other maids always complimented her. The Baroness also pointed out that the maids at the Imperial Palace were usually top-notch, but something still felt off. Then she remembered that maids who screwed up got seriously punished. Appleton added that they'd get locked in cages or flogged, and if they messed up again, they'd lose a limb. Then she asked Jean what kind of punishment she thought she deserved, and the poor girl was just shaking with fear. Siana jumped in, explaining that their skills were still pretty basic, and Jean wasn't ready to be serving such high-ranking guests. Then the former princess started begging the Baroness to forgive the maid for her mistake. But the Baroness snapped back that if all it took was a bow and an apology, their world would be ridiculously simple. Appleton didn't see why she should give the maid a second chance, especially since the royal family was throwing this banquet. Siana explained that if this party got ruined because of one measly maid, the king would be seriously pissed. She was hoping the Baroness wouldn't want that. But for some reason, the Baroness took her words as a threat. The former princess swore she wouldn't act like that and explained they were just requests to make the guest comfortable. After thinking it over, the Baroness agreed to be served by Siana, but declared that if she wasn't satisfied, all her rage would be unleashed on her. The maid agreed, but then she saw her stepmother's face again, the one where she actually complimented her tea. This was a zero-mistake situation. It stole part of her life, and she'd never be able to forget that time. Now, pouring tea for the Baroness, she explained its origin again, hoping she wouldn't mind trying this particular blend. The Baroness watched the maid's every move and noticed that her manners were impeccable. Siana knew the most important part of tea was the leaves, and the ratio of boiling water to those leaves. The mistake was in how the tea was brewed and served, which made the taste bitter and the aroma weak. You couldn't screw this up, and the amount of hot water couldn't be way more than the tea, or it'd taste wrong. Also, to pour tea right, you gotta lift the kettle high, let it hit the air. That's how the aroma spreads quicker. Gotta watch out the tea doesn't spill outside the cup, then slowly hand the cup to your guest. Siana was dead certain she nailed the tea-to-water ratio and told the Baroness to speak up if anything was off. She knew she brewed it perfectly, picking the best leaves. But if the guest didn't like it, she was screwed. Frozen, waiting for a reaction, Siana even held her breath. But then Appleton announced that the tea was delicious. The former princess celebrated silently, glad she pulled it off, and then decided to take her leave. She just asked her guest to call her if she needed anything at all. Soon the tea party and that chill vibe came to an end. And after that, the guests started heading out little by little. Siana went up to the lady she'd been serving earlier and apologized for having to leave her. But she assured me everything was cool, because if the Baroness had gotten pissed, things would have been way worse. And she admitted she was scared too. The Madame also said that thanks to Siana's work, they totally enjoyed the banquet. And then she thanked her. The girl was just glad this guest understood their situation and told her to be careful before she left. Then that old lady came up to Siana, and the maid figured she was about to say something to her. She started hesitantly, saying she'd been thinking a lot, and admitted she'd been sure she'd be treated like crap in the Imperial Palace. She also said she was scared at first, but swore she got lucky with Siana, and that's when she found her courage. The girl, all happy again, repeated that the amount of boiling water shouldn't be more than the tea, or the flavor changes. Then the old lady admitted she'd had the most amazing chocolate tea and just had a blast talking. Siana remembered that for ages, maids aren't supposed to show too much emotion. Just be polite to everyone. Even though she was super happy it all worked out, she had no clue what to do next. Still, she cracked a smile and thanked the old lady for introducing her to such amazing people. The Baroness watched from a short distance as Siana said goodbye to the old woman. After the banquet itself, the maids started cleaning up, basically dedicating their entire day to serving the guests. This life was supposed to be for maids, but in reality, it was more like training for maids. Their work wraps up super late, and by the end of the day, Lip knew she was beat and needed to crash. But it wasn't all bad, since they got to enjoy the leftovers from the feast. Siana was polishing off some bitter cocoa with fancy butter, but Choo-Choo passed, saying she'd lose muscle mass. The princess even felt sorry for her, thinking things must be tough, but the maid had no clue why she kept staring. Choo-Choo admitted she never expected things to turn out this way when she started working. Remembering a lady who offered to take her in, the guest figured she'd be useful on the farm. After checking out her massive triceps, Siana still couldn't figure out why she refused to work on the farm. And the other girl explained that's what the other maids wanted for her. Right then, the other maids came over, showering the princess with praise for handling the Baroness so well. Then they started begging the girl to teach them how to make tea that perfectly, even arguing over who'd get to learn first. But then Jean yelled, "Have you all lost your minds?" Zrenia reminding them that she was the best tea maker. The redhead maid couldn't believe the others were ignoring her now, deciding they had no pride. The girls were surprised, thinking she should be feeling ashamed right now, and that's probably why she'd been silent. They also started scolding her, saying the banquet almost fell apart because of her, and thanked Siana for fixing everything. They also explained that otherwise, they all could have been punished, and Jean herself could have been fired. Now they were blasting her, saying that instead of apologizing, she's saying stuff like that, and told her to think straight. Jean immediately blew up, declaring she didn't understand how anyone could even talk to people like them. Meanwhile, Siana remembered the Baroness was a cut above the other guests. Even her posture screamed elegance. The girl noticed more than just her posture. Even her gestures during tea showed she was born aristocracy. Siana also really liked this lady, but not because she was a Baroness. The girl sensed something special about her. Late that night, Sul, the guard standing at the Emperor's bedroom door, noticed someone approaching. He recognized the Baroness, but explained that if she entered the room dressed like that, it would cause trouble. But Appleton, with her rigid adherence to etiquette, confessed that she still couldn't forget that maid. The guard just asked her to forget it, assuring her that no one was planning anything shady. Then, noticing her look, Seoul started apologizing, clarifying that he didn't mean it like that at all. But she just smiled, thinking he was being funny, and explained that it wouldn't be funny at all. The Baroness also couldn't understand what kind of soldiers they were turning into, and hoped to see him begging for forgiveness. Then, walking into the Emperor's room, Appleton saw all sorts of critters and birds waiting there to greet her. The Baroness didn't care how it looked. She just really liked them. Then a little bird flew over and landed on her hand. Just then, Seoul called her Your Majesty and explained that he already had a bath prepared. Rashid decided to change his appearance for half a day, using a magic stone that cost a fortune to do it. Once the Emperor was settled in the bath, the guard asked how the meeting went and if the maids handled their duties. He admitted that it went pretty well, and that the one who was recently a princess managed to learn all the etiquette. Still, Rashid was bothered by how she held the teapot, and that she didn't look him directly in the eye. Even so, he thought it was wonderful, and everything was done exactly as it was written in the maid's etiquette manual. The Emperor found this girl pretty interesting, and the guard couldn't understand why he was even thinking like that. Saul knew that he usually hated stuff like that, and now he didn't understand what was up with His Majesty. A lot of people noticed the Emperor started being kinder, more approachable, and the girls even had the nerve to ask what his type was. Rashid couldn't give a straight answer, just mumbled something about liking cute girls who win you over with their smiles. His Majesty's changed so much. It's almost weird the way he looks at his people now. The guard also figured the princess had settled in, and maybe being a maid was her calling. Seoul also noticed the Emperor only ever talked about her, never about getting married and having an heir. The guard started to suspect His Majesty planned to make this girl more than just a personal servant. Then, he reminded Rashid that Siana was from the country he conquered, and if he was planning anything shady, it would end in disaster. He explained he was just testing her abilities, then confessed that he thought she looked stunning. Meanwhile, the princess found a rip in her apron and decided to fix it real quick, since she'd been doing embroidery since she was 5. While the maids were gawking at how fast she did it, Lip walked in and announced that Siana had a visitor. The teacher said Baroness Appleton wanted to explain something to her. That's why she was here. The girl was confused. The tea party had gone well. She figured she must have screwed something up. On the way, she ran through a million scenarios in her head, but couldn't figure out where she went wrong. Then she walked into the hall, and the Baroness immediately apologized for showing up unannounced. But then she stood up, and Siana was shocked to see it wasn't the Baroness, but that old lady. She then apologized to the maid and decided to introduce herself, explaining that she was Magdalena Appleton. The old woman also stated that Siana had made a good impression at the tea party, then greeted her again. This all caught her totally off guard, so she decided to hand the maid the basket of apples. She also asked the girl to give her a little time, and now Siana realized that this was the real Baroness Appleton. Now the princess was even more shocked and didn't understand who that other woman was, even though she hadn't said she was the Baroness. Siana instantly started apologizing to the old woman for not understanding and making a mistake that offended her honor and dignity. The girl was so ashamed in that moment, and she kept begging forgiveness for her behavior. But the old woman just laughed, and then explained that she had hidden her identity willingly. She explained that the tea banquet at the Imperial Palace was an opportunity she might never get again. The Baroness understood that she needed to go, but her appearance wasn't as good as it used to be, and she was afraid people wouldn't treat her with respect when they saw her like this, so it was better not to show up. Appleton understood that if she went to this celebration, everyone there would be talking about her. Everyone would judge her and ask how the Baroness could become so hideous. The old woman confessed that even in her own garden, she often heard similar taunts, and it was hard on her. Then she got another letter, offering to hide the fact that she was actually the Baroness. That's when Magdalena wondered if she should go, knowing this was her last shot at getting out. The old woman also knew that if she didn't reveal who she was, nobody would give a damn about her. But then she saw Siana, who greeted her super politely and invited her to a table. The Baroness noticed that even without makeup, that outfit couldn't hide the girl's class. Appleton was blown away that day. Siana's grace and politeness really impressed her, and she wanted to be just like that. After tea, the old woman started studying etiquette and even practiced in front of the mirror, figuring out how to thank the girl for a nice time. Also, Magdalena really wanted to treat the maid to some stuff from her farm, because she was seriously grateful for that day. The princess couldn't believe the actual Baroness came to thank a maid. She noticed the position of her hands, the angle of her bow, and the way her dress fell. Every move screamed nobility. Even though it was just a greeting, Markedlena Appleton was showing everyone the kind of person she was. The old lady remembered Siana telling her not to worry about a thing and just enjoy herself. And the princess realized this was someone who lived surrounded by love, because only love can do all that. Then she bowed before the Baroness, insisting she didn't deserve such praise. The girl didn't know if she could accept it with grace, but she had no choice but to take her gift. Holding the basket of apples high, Siana declared she'd always remember the fruit the Baroness gave her. Then she shared the apples with the other maids, and one started wondering why Snow White ate a poisoned apple. But another said she'd eat it even if it was poisoned, because they're so sweet, and asked for another one. The maids, who toiled every day and ate black bread, were overjoyed that the Baroness had given them honey apples. As they ate the fruit, they now considered her a goddess, shouting how much they loved this woman now. Now Siana herself decided to try the apples, and noticed they really were delicious. But now she couldn't shake the question of who that woman was, the one everyone mistook for the Baroness. To Sian, she looked like a prince, with the same hair and violet eyes. For a second, she thought it was the princess, checking up on the new maids. Just then, the instructor walked in, told them to stop eating, and announced that Sheehan was now a full-time maid. The princess was so shocked, she dropped the apple she was holding, because she definitely wasn't expecting that. Jean immediately started yelling that it couldn't be true, that it was complete nonsense, and that nobody understood the decision. She demanded the instructor explain everything, who then reminded them about the tea party a few days ago. Then she clarified that it was actually a test of the students' abilities, and stated that there was no question who did the best. After that, Lip declared the topic closed, and ordered Sian to be at the Ruby Castle at dawn. The instructor explained that the girl would now be serving Princess Eris, and then left. Siana was blown away. All the other girls wanted to be head maids, but she showed up last and got picked first. The ex-princess just wanted to blend in, and now all the other maids are gonna hate her guts. She knew she'd have to get used to this kind of treatment, and that really bummed her out. But then she heard her friends congratulating her, saying she was finally free. Some even admitted they were jealous, but still happy for her, and Siana realized she was just being a downer for no reason. Still, she was a little bummed, but if she hadn't stepped in, that tea party would have been a total disaster. The girls also confessed that even though they wanted to be head maids, they weren't about to turn into jealous jerks. Besides, she hooked them up with those amazing apples, and then Siana thanked them for their support. She saw completely different people in them, nothing like the snakes she knew back in the kingdom, and promised to bring them treats with her first paycheck. And of course, Jean just had to chime in with her complaints, insulting the other maids while she was at it. She was saying they were totally nuts, that it was weird Siana, with her shady background, got promoted so fast. But Choo Choo stepped up, told Red that she was full of crap, and Red felt her whole body start to tremble. Still, she had enough guts left to threaten to tell her daddy everything about the others. Then she stormed out, and even though the girls thought her behavior was awful, they were happy, because now they'd get more apples. Jean yelled at everyone, but the maids quickly forgot about it with the tasty food and the chatter. Siana was glad she didn't have much luggage, even though she never expected to be going anywhere from here. But starting tomorrow, she'd be the head maid of the Imperial Palace. And honestly, that's better than being a princess. She was thinking that even though she was super tired, it was a good job. And then someone knocked. It was Choo Choo, and Siana figured something was up. But she explained that nothing bad had happened. Then the muscular maid handed the former princess a hairpin, explaining that she wanted to give her a gift for her promotion. She also explained she grabbed it last minute because she was short on time, but hoped I'd dig it. Choo Choo also said maids are allowed to doll up a bit, and told me not to think she was any less than anyone else. Siana knew the junior maids barely made anything, and this girl bought her a gift, blowing her savings. Noticing her friend's pensive look, Choo Choo guessed she didn't like the present. Then she said she asked them to pick the prettiest one, but that's when Siana jumped on her with a hug. Then the ex-princess thanked her, saying it was an awesome gift, and she totally loved it. Around Choo Choo, Siana always felt warmth, and knew she'd miss her, but believed everything would be all right. In the morning, Lip asked one of the maids if Princess Grace had her own personal maid. The girl said that was her, and explained she asked to be transferred here because it was unbearable there. She knew it seemed crazy to outsiders, but only those who'd been there knew what was messed up about that job. The maid was all, "I'd rather scrub floors and run errands," and figured no maid on earth could ever please that princess. She remembered how awful it was in that palace, and swore there wasn't a single person in the whole empire who could handle it. A little later, Siana finished getting ready, believing her future would be way better than when she was a princess, and prepared to leave. Right before she left, that same maid popped in and said she hated to break it to her, but that job was going to be a nightmare. She explained that all the previous maids had bailed, and she dipped the second she got the chance. Siana guessed it must have been super tough doing it alone, and the maid agreed, especially keeping an eye on the princess. She also added that Princess Aris wasn't just picky. Everyone in the palace thought she was straight up the devil in disguise. There was this amazing palace with a small garden, which the emperor gave to Rosemary, a dancer he fell for at first sight. That was the Ruby Palace, and now the princess she birthed lives there, the 7th princess of the empire. Then the maid led Siana to that palace, which looked pretty gloomy from the outside. As she went inside, the maid decided to gently call the princess, but there was no response. So they continued down the hallway, and the servant knocked on the bedroom door, announcing the new maid had arrived. Siana was still hoping this princess had just been branded a mudblood or something. But as soon as they stepped inside, a gigantic spider with hairy legs appeared right in front of them. The maid who worked there before instantly screamed hysterically from fright, and then started feeling sick. Then Aris came out, and Siana thought it was unreal how she could be so energetic in this situation. The princess was holding the spider on a string and asked why the newbie hadn't reacted. Siana immediately apologized and said she'd be happy to fake whatever reaction the princess wanted to see. Then, Siana grabbed her head and screamed at the top of her lungs, like she was totally freaked out by something. After that, she asked permission to introduce herself, and when the princess gave the okay, she greeted her properly. Aris couldn't help but notice the new maid wasn't scared at all, and couldn't believe her prank hadn't worked. Tossing the spider aside, the princess told them to get lost, saying she was sick of all the maids. Siana wasn't sure what just happened, but then that maid started talking to her like nothing fazed her. She started thanking her, saying there was never a chance to leave before, since there wasn't a suitable maid. But Siana still asked what she was supposed to do here, and found out she just had to watch the princess, and the rest was up to her. The maid explained that there's no one else around anyway, except for her, and that weird little girl. The girl knew that all the work was now on her, but since she came, she had to get to it. She decided to start with cleaning, and realized that no one had tidied up in ages. Everything was getting cleaned up right before her eyes. And soon, Siana saw that it wasn't so gloomy after all. Just then, the princess came to her and declared that everything she was doing was pointless, and she didn't care about cleanliness. So Siana turned to the little girl and asked what business she had with her. But Aris was pissed that she was being treated like a real princess again, like nobody could treat her that way. Then she demanded the newbie stop acting all nice, and then declared that she'd be ditching this place the first chance she got. Meanwhile, Sol was asking the emperor why Siana had been sent to the Ruby Palace, while he thought it was better to do things methodically, not just on a whim of His Majesty. Rasheed chimed in that the girl could be invited to his palace too, and the guard promised to pass the order to the maid. The emperor repeated that he could bring Siana here right now, without even giving her a chance to think about it, as he remembered seeing her at the banquet, especially how sweetly she said goodbye to the real Baroness. Rasheed thought the girl was really sweet, especially when she smiled, and hoped they would see each other soon, even though the Ruby Palace was far. Siana, meanwhile, was explaining to the princess that it was a secret, and asked her to explain where she'd heard it. She told the kid she just worked there, but if she found a better gig, she'd bounce for sure. But for now, she was sticking around and would do everything she could to take care of the princess. Later, she tucked Aris into bed, and in the morning, brought her food. But the kid refused, saying the milk and veggies tasted like poison. Then the princess demanded cookies, but Siana explained that snacking instead of eating a real meal was bad for you. She also said that if she didn't eat right, she'd get sick all the time, and it was super important for a princess to be healthy. That's when Aris declared she was old enough to know better, but the maid pointed out that she was skin and bones. The girl knew that no matter how difficult Aris was, it wasn't right that nobody could be bothered to look after her. The princess also claimed the maid was lying, because she was already 10, but the maid swore it was true. Then she repeated again that if she kept this up, she was going to have some serious health problems. After that, she promised the princess some sweets if she finished her whole breakfast. After breakfast, Aris didn't want to brush her teeth either, so Siana threatened to skip her sweets tomorrow. The next day, the maid opened the window and saw it was an awesome morning, the sun practically begging to come inside. But the princess was still lounging in bed, all bundled up in the blanket, and even decided to ditch breakfast. Siana finally managed to drag her up, but then Aris saw the food and demanded something decent to eat. The maid explained that this was decent food, and that she herself had also eaten a cream bun and some fried chicken. Aris just started yelling again, now because the maid had eaten everything, but she pointed out she was just following royal family rules. She also added that after mealtime was over, any food that was left over was for the servants. Now Siana felt pretty full, and she'd also found a way to get the picky kid to eat. If you make a kid hungry enough, they'll eat anything, and the maid was just scarfing down all her food. The girl remembered being locked in a room for days without food, and now she was executing her plan perfectly. The whole point of this plan was also to find out the princess's favorite food, and she ended up scarfing down the whole salad. But Eris claimed she just decided not to leave anything for the servants, remembering they get leftovers after the master eats. So the kid decided to leave the maid hungry, but Siana just praised her for doing such a good job. At the same time, the maid stroked Eris's hair, pretending to apologize for her rude behavior. She just asked her to leave again, but then noticed something in her hair and tried to pull it out. Siana, meanwhile, was happy that the food situation was resolved, and it was time to take care of cleanliness. She invited the princess to take a bath, but she started screaming that she hated water, bubbles, and the scratchy brush. Then the maid explained that if she didn't wash, cockroaches would come, because they like everything dirty. She added that these cockroaches eat skin and hair, and they even poop in it sometimes. But Eris screamed that it was a lie. The princess declared that she hadn't seen any cockroaches the whole time, and then the maid pointed out that the girl's head was itching. She told the kid to listen for the scurrying, explained it was roaches munching on stuff. The princess freaked out, thought bugs would eat her, and demanded the maid wash her up right then. At first, the loofah felt rough, but the longer she scrubbed, the better it felt. Then some foam got in her eyes. But Eris didn't feel any sting. She just liked the rosemary smell. Siana used the same trick to get her to brush her teeth, saying roaches eat teeth with food stuck on them. Soon, Eris said this maid was driving her nuts, complaining she was exhausted and had no energy left. Siana just praised the princess for doing a good job and told her she needed a good night's sleep to recharge. But then Eris started yelling that she'd been bugging her all day and didn't want her bothering her in her sleep too. The princess declared she sleeps when she wants, and the maid admitted she just wanted her to fall asleep quickly. Siana also confessed she knew an interesting story, but if the princess wasn't interested, she'd just leave. But Eris stopped her and asked her to tell her a story, and the maid agreed. Siana began. Once upon a time, there lived a diamond princess who loved precious gems more than anything. She collected them from everywhere, and then one day, she decided to cover her entire body with them, making her shine brighter than the sun. But then, she heard news that the dragon who lived in the west had the most beautiful diamond in the world. The princess desired it so much that she ventured through thorn bushes and swamps all by herself. When she arrived at the castle, the dragon saw how beautiful she was and offered her marriage in exchange for the diamond. Just then, Siana noticed Eris starting to yawn, and a few moments later, she was fast asleep. Wishing the girl sweet dreams, the maid kissed her and promised herself that she would make sure she grew up the healthiest she could be. The girl understood that this was the duty of Princess Eris's personal maid. A lot had changed since Siana arrived at this palace, but the girl was starting to act up again. The princess cut across the flower bed too, but the maid was all, "Hey, no running! I just planted those, the seeds will get hurt." Eris asked what kind of flowers they were, and the maid just rattled off a bunch of names. She went on about how the light's perfect here, the soil's rich, and if you water 'em right, they'll bloom like crazy. Then the maid promised, once the buds open up, she'd make the princess an awesome flower crown. The whole time, the kid's just thinking, why does Siana always treat her like she's the only princess in the world? Eris was like, what's this maid's deal? She figured the maid was definitely holding something back, keeping secrets. The princess wanted to know what she was really after. But then she noticed the maid just giving her this sweet smile. Then Eris spotted a hairpin on the floor, popped it right in her hair, and when Siana saw it, her face went totally stone cold. That was the hairpin Choo-Choo gave her, and no matter how swamped she was, she couldn't afford to lose it. So she walked over to the princess, and all apologetic, explained that the hairpin was actually hers. The girl also explained that she must have dropped it while tending the flower bed, and then asked for it back. But the little brat wasn't about to hand it over easily, and said if she wanted it back, she'd have to try and take it. Then Eris took off, confident that the maid would never catch her. Nobody ever had. But soon the girl saw the maid was almost on top of her and couldn't figure out how she was so fast. They ended up by the fountain, and when they stopped, Siana explained that snatching stuff and running wasn't cool. Then she demanded the girl give the hairpin back, and Eris just figured, bummed out, that everything she'd said was just empty promises. The girl got all upset that Siana had promised to take care of her, and now she just chucked the hairpin in the water. She remembered one of the maids coming up to the princess and hugging her, promising that as her servant, she'd do anything Eris told her to. The girl thanked her and instantly felt all warm and fuzzy, like her mom was right there with her again. And then that maid got arrested, accused of stealing stuff from the palace and selling it, and she'd have to answer for it in court. They were dragging the maid away, and she kept begging the princess for help, but all she said was, "It's an order." The next maid packed her stuff real quick too, and straight up told the princess she was useless, like, totally worthless. After that, the girl was all alone. and it hit her. She wasn't a princess, not without her mom. She was nobody. Even with that messed up family history, she never thought she was completely useless. But even her nanny bailed because she was too picky. Now Siana was in front of her, supposed to be serving her too, and that's when the girl woke up. She knew it was just a bad dream, but the truth was, everyone leaves her. And when she didn't see Siana, she figured she was gone too. Eris figured she'd packed up her stuff last night and left, so she wanted to know in advance if she'd be abandoned, so it wouldn't hurt so bad. Just then, the maid walked in, reciting some goofy poem, and noticed the princess was up super early. But seeing the weird look on the girl's face, she knew she'd had a nightmare, and told her she could go back to sleep. Siana also explained to the kid that when you're sleepy, you don't feel hungry, so your digestion just shuts down. But Eris just couldn't believe they hadn't abandoned her, not even after everything that happened. The princess immediately ran to hug her, and then confessed that she really hadn't wanted to do what she did. The little girl also apologized, and begged the maid not to hate her for throwing away the hairpin. Siana assured her that everything was okay, but Eris still couldn't believe it, and the maid explained that little kids sometimes do things like that. At the same time, the girl admitted that she was happy the princess had sincerely apologized. The girl also confessed that she knew how unpleasant the palace was for Siana, because there were so many chores and she was all alone. And then she suddenly promised the maid that she would help her with everything, and also obey her and share her candy. Eris was ready to do anything, just so this maid wouldn't leave her, and Siana agreed to help her grow into a worthy princess. From that day on, the princess really changed a lot and helped out, watering the flower beds or trying to clean the rooms. The girl was worried that it would be hard for the little one, but she didn't give up, and she was actually doing pretty well. Siana kept trying to get through to her that kids have more important stuff to do than cleaning and laundry. The maid clarified to the princess that she meant studying, and the kid even got upset. But Siana reminded her about promising to be a good girl. The servant explained to the girl that she didn't have to know hard subjects yet, but her handwriting had to be perfect. Then she went to grab a pen and paper, but when she opened the drawer, she noticed the stuff she needed wasn't there. The maid promised she'd find what she needed real quick and be right back. Then she asked a clerk to give her some pens and paper, but he refused, saying he couldn't just hand that stuff out to anyone. Siana explained it was for the princess's lessons, but he'd had maids try to pull that for the princess card before. He also told her that if she needed anything, she had to get permission from the emperor himself. The girl knew no one would give her permission, and she almost lost it. And that's when Eris asked if she should tell Rasheed's brother. It was only then that Siana remembered the crown prince, and then she wondered if they were close. The princess said he got along great with her mom, but wasn't sure if it'd be the same with her. The maid figured if Rasheed got curious, he'd bite for sure, so they had to give it a shot. Then she suggested the princess write him a letter, and before you know it, he shows up asking how they're doing. Eris was also clueless about why he was there, saying all he had to do was send confirmation. Rasheed explained he got the letter, that his little sister needed help, so he decided to deliver the confirmation himself. He also pointed out that when you have guests, you greet them and offer them a cup of tea first. The maid immediately apologized, saying there wouldn't be any tea since they were out of tea leaves. But the prince told her not to sweat it, saying he brought everything, and telling her the brand, asked her to make it. Siana never imagined she'd meet the emperor in the imperial palace like this. Plus, she noticed Rasheed was staring at her, and she wondered if he even remembered her. After seeing, she also noticed how he held the teacup, and those movements seemed really familiar. The princess loved the tea, saying she'd never tasted anything like it, and complimented that it wasn't even hot. The girl explained it was because of the prince's tea leaves, but he said the princess's tea was delicious too. At that moment, the girl thought the emperor remembered her, and the little princess also felt like they knew each other. Rasheed was surprised Sian hadn't mentioned him, then admitted he'd hired this girl as a maid and sent her here. Eris started asking why he did that, and her brother explained that he thought this maid was a cutie. Just then, a guard approached the emperor and reminded him about the upcoming royal visit, so they needed to leave. Rasheed was bummed he didn't even finish his tea, but Sol pointed out he'd emptied the cup, looking surprised. Then the prince handed his sister a document, and she asked how she should pay him, but he insisted the cup of tea was enough. Afterwards, His Majesty thanked the maid for brewing the delicious tea, and she, in turn, thanked him. That's when Eris told her brother to back off someone else's maid and demanded he get lost. The prince finally admitted he'd try to be less pushy, and after he left, Siana realized just how close the sisters were. But the little princess shot back, saying their relationship was actually awful. The maid also noticed the princess had a good talk with her brother after getting that document, but she claimed it was just a small deal. The girl also explained that even though her brother agreed, He put her in major debt since they're competing for the throne. Siana had previously thought the crown prince was the sole heir to the empire, but a lot had changed. This also meant the power struggle between brother and sister was still on. Eris was feeling pretty good right now, even though she has no family or mother to support her. The girl also confessed she didn't want this fate for herself, but at the same time, she's glad she can take on this challenge from destiny. Now, Siana understood she was wrong when she initially thought the brother and sister got along well. If they actually cared about each other, she wouldn't treat the princess's feelings like they're nothing. Siana knew being a princess sucks in every royal family, and you gotta ditch your childhood to be throne-worthy. She wondered how she could handle that weight all alone. And then Eris asked if she wanted more tea. The maid was also thinking back to when all she wanted was a simple life in this crazy world. Meanwhile, Sol was grilling the prince about whether he was into Siana, and he said her big eyes made her look like a squirrel. Then His Majesty started thinking about snatching the maid for himself, and asked if the guard had noticed any changes around the palace. He admitted it was noticeably cleaner, and he'd seen Princess Eris looking way better than before, too. They both agreed the maid was doing a good job, and then the prince shoved Sol, cause he was being a drag. Rasheed also said he was stoked Eris finally opened up to Siana, and that she doesn't judge people based on their title or power. He also pointed out the maid's down-to-earth and good at connecting with people, even though that's not enough to earn real trust. Then, His Majesty remembered how his sister, when she was still in the womb, was just as restless. Rosemary even let him touch her stomach, and he could see for himself how much that kid kicked. Rasheed then added that everything that was cute stayed in Aris, while admitting that he liked the tea Siana brewed. Meanwhile, the maid asked the princess if His Majesty would be visiting them often now, but she didn't know. After a while, Siana ran into Choo-Choo near the warehouse, and the girls were really happy to see each other. Strong Girl noticed that her friend had gotten a little pale, and she in turn noticed that Choo-Choo had gotten bigger. She confessed that she was training a lot now to bulk up her body, and then asked how Siana was doing. The girl adjusted the gifted hairpin, which she had again, and told her a little about herself. Recently, the Emperor visited her and Eris again, deciding to just drop by on his way. He also brought them a cake with lots of filling and chocolate, declaring that it was for the princess. After that, he asked Siana to take care of him today, and the girl couldn't disobey his order. While she was brewing some delicious tea, Aris decided to wait so she could have the cake with it. When everything was ready, the princess noticed the dessert was super tasty, and she thanked her brother. Then the little kid declared that it was unfair to pay for her testimony with just 2 cups of tea. So, she asked her brother to grant her another request, explaining that she'd recently dropped a maid's hairpin in the water. His Majesty understood what his sister wanted and promised he'd do it for her. And Siana, overhearing, was actually a little surprised. Soon, the servants drained the fountain so the bottom was visible, and then they started looking for the lost item. Choo-Choo couldn't believe that 100 soldiers were working on this, but Siana assured her that was exactly what was happening. And even before that, the maid had received another confirmation from the prince, because she needed to sew some new clothes for Aris. She needed high-quality fabrics for this, and when the storekeeper saw the prince's seal on the letter, he was totally shocked. So, she pulled it off, because she knew maids needed serious endurance, and she buckled down and got it done. That night, when Siana was hauling the fabrics back, she thought someone was pushing from behind, giving her a hand. But when she turned around, she saw Emperor Rasheed standing there with a genuine smile on his face. She immediately apologized and greeted him, not realizing it was him, and he asked why there were so many things on the cart. His Majesty then asked the maid to look up and explained he just wanted to help, but she didn't understand why. Rasheed then explained again that she was so small and the cart was so big, so he just figured he'd lend a hand. After telling her friend all this, Siana decided to say goodbye, worried the princess would start looking for her. But then Choo-Choo confessed her suspicions that the crown prince has some kind of mental issues and is definitely nuts. She added that a low-ranking maid's life is worse than a fly's, and no matter what, they're just slave labor. Choo-Choo also admitted she's worried, because Rasheed might lose it around Siana, and she should get a job at the Ruby Palace too. But the ex-princess figured, talented as her friend was, there was no way they'd send her there, even if she could become an official maid. As the girls were saying goodbye, Eris walked up and was like, "What's taking Siana so long?" "I'm starving." The maid reported that she'd made the princess a snack before leaving, and Eris explained she'd already inhaled those 10 cookies. Then the little brat grabbed the maid's hand and begged her to come back, because she was seriously hungry. As she left, Aris gave Choo-Choo a nasty look, so Siana didn't think they'd send another maid to the Ruby Palace. Back at the palace, the princess guessed that the maid liked this Choo-Choo so much because she was big and buff. The girl explained that she was one of the students and added that she liked her because she was super kind and helpful. Siana also confirmed that Choo Choo was seriously strong and could carry multiple sacks on just one arm. After that, the princess asked the maid to make meat and milk today, declaring that she wasn't a kid anymore and it was time to change her diet. The girl remarked that the little brat was kinda cute when she was mad, but then she heard a familiar voice behind her again. The emperor and his lackey strolled up, and the princess immediately wanted to know what brought him back again. Rashid said he just wanted to check on them, but she shot back that after 5 visits, he should know the drill. Then, he held out a dessert and explained it was a sponge cake topped with whipped cream made from the best white milk. Plus, the cake's decorated with fresh fruit, and the prince also brought tea again. Eris had a sweet tooth, and figured since he brought cake, he could stick around this time. Rashid told Siana to be careful, but all she could think was how suspiciously friendly he was acting. Still, she invited them inside, all the while thinking the emperor had officially lost his mind. As he entered the building, the guard glanced back, like he spotted something, but didn't see the cloaked figure ducking around the corner. It was his sister, who decided to tail him, and now saw her brother was heading to the Ruby Palace again. Then she went to the 5th princess, Yvette, and reported that the prince brought a ton of sweets for Princess Eris this time. She was just pissed that His Majesty kept coming to this place, and it really got under her skin. With her was Leovisuan Diaro, the emperor's 5th wife, who thought the little girl was just a poor kid. But Yvette was still ticked off because she outranked her and didn't get why she wasn't worthy of all this. The princess didn't get why Rashid was being so friendly with Aris, because that girl was a total loser. So, she figured that to get her brother's attention, she had to meet this girl in person. Then she wrote her a letter, saying she wanted to meet up and have a heart-to-heart over tea. Eris realized Yvette was planning a sneak attack, and it really bugged her, which she told her maid. Siana thought she was tormenting the little princess, who knew she'd just giggle and trash her outfit when they met. But the girl also understood why, because she didn't know any etiquette and felt like just an empty princess shell. The maid told her not to think like that, saying she was there for her, and promised to get Aris ready for the tea party. Siana was about to spill everything to the princess and scrambled to grab some books, but the kid was totally lost. Aris couldn't figure out how a regular maid knew all this stuff, so Siana explained she was the princess's personal maid. Up till now, Siana figured the girl didn't want to learn, but she needed to know at least basic table manners. She needed to, or she wouldn't last a day in the imperial palace. Siana started by saying you can't drink tea until the host takes a sip. Also, you gotta drink tea quietly, and as soon as you take a sip, you set the cup right back on the saucer. And that shouldn't make a sound either. Princess Eris thought it all sounded way too complicated. Still, she gave it a shot, and to her surprise, she nailed it. The maid immediately gave her props. Next, the girl practiced thanking someone for the delicious tea, and she got another compliment from her teacher. Siana was stoked that the girl was paying attention and was doing everything perfectly. She was a fast learner. To pump her up even more, the maid started calling the princess a genius, which she totally loved. Unlike nobles who love sucking up, the royal family has to be arrogant, or they'll get walked all over. Meanwhile, the emperor showed up uninvited and immediately noticed his sister was drinking differently now. His Majesty could see that Eris's manners had changed too. Then he glanced at the maid and knew she was behind it. Siana was hoping the crown prince wouldn't notice anything, and she felt a little uneasy that he actually did. Still, the maid owed the princess, so she was confident she could handle it and prepared for a positive outcome. Soon, the etiquette training was over, and the next day, Siana decided to embellish the little lady's dress. Eris was surprised the maid had sewn the dress herself, and Siana admitted she wanted her to look perfect. The maid hoped the princess liked it and asked how she felt wearing the new outfit. The girl just twirled in front of the maid, asking how she looked, and then, both satisfied, they went to get ready. By this time, Yvette was already waiting for them. Thinking her little sister would be wearing rags as usual today, she remembered scolding Aris for eating with her hands. Thinking she was just some disgusting commoner, Yvette figured things would be exactly the same, and she could make fun of her sister again, which made her feel good. But little Aris was late, and the 5th princess actually started getting bored waiting, pissed off that she still hadn't shown up. Then she heard a kid's voice behind her, thanking her for inviting her to tea. Turning around, she couldn't believe her eyes. That little dirtbag now looked like a princess. Siana chimed in, saying Aris looked gorgeous, like a fairy from some mythical fairy tale. She was just basking in her own beauty, convinced she was beautiful because she looked like her mom. The maid repeated that she would be the most charming at the tea party and could win the battle by capturing everyone's attention. Seeing her sister's stunned expression, Aris asked what was wrong, smiling sweetly, like she was trying to annoy Yvette. The girl remembered the maid's advice. Keep smiling, because a smile always wins at the door. Eris also noticed her sister had gone completely pale, but she just said she was happy to see her after so long. Yvette even found it funny watching this little kid try to play princess, but she invited her to the table anyway. The fifth princess admitted she had a lot of news, and also remarked that her sister actually looked like a human being now. At the same time, she was mentally trying to figure out what happened to the monster she'd seen last time. Then she saw how meticulously the maid was taking care of the girl, and decided all these changes were because of her. But to her sister, Yvette declared she was glad she'd finally grown up, and then dismissively gave an order. She pointed out that her cup was empty and demanded it be filled again, and the maid came over to pour more tea. But Yvette protested, explaining that it shouldn't be the servant pouring, but her sister herself. The girl remembered that even though she'd studied etiquette, she hadn't had any lessons on serving tea yet. Iris realized her sister was trying her hardest to find fault with her, but she picked up the teapot anyway. The little princess knew if things kept going this way, she'd have no choice but to take matters into her own hands. So, she knocked her teacup over, splashing Yvette, who jumped up totally shocked. Iris just gave a polite apology, saying her hand suddenly spazzed out. But Yvette started yelling that she'd hurt her. Now, playing the big sister, Yvette geared up to punish the little brat and raised her hand to strike. But the maid stopped her, looming over her like a storm cloud, telling her to cut it out, while Iris just watched from behind her. The fifth princess was floored by the maid's actions, who then begged her to forgive her sister, saying she saw her set her up. Siana also added that no one can punish royalty without His Majesty's direct order. It's the law. Yvette was pissed that even though she outranked her, the maid was trying to lecture her on family rules. It was just a formality, and nobody really followed them, so the weak were supposed to be trampled without a second thought. Yvette knew damn well nobody cared about those rules, and now some maid was trying to call her out on it. Still, she admitted the girl was sharp, so even though her sister learned manners, they really had the maid to thank. Then she got in Siana's face, asking how she dared touch royalty, and declared she deserved punishment. Right then, her own maid showed up and started yelling that this maid was trying to humiliate a member of the royal family. Then she shoved Siana to the floor, and all Siana did was thank her for teaching her the rules. Stunned, Iris didn't know what to say, especially since she was just a kid. But they decided to get out of there. As they left, the fifth princess yelled that she hoped to see them again, and told her sister to just shut up. Once Siana and the little one were in the carriage, Iris asked why the maid did that, but Siana didn't know what she meant. The little princess understood that the maid had suffered because of her, taking the whole hit. But this woman defended her, and then Iris suggested they clean up the wound first. When they got to the palace, Iris started dabbing at the scratch with a wet cotton pad, and Siana realized the princess had never done this before. The little girl got flustered, but Siana reassured her it was okay, and decided to teach the kid how to treat wounds properly. Siana explained that first, you gotta disinfect the cotton swab and then dab it on the wound. Just then, she noticed the princess was starting to cry, and figured she was just mad about what happened today. Iris admitted she was a little, but Siana explained that Iris was just as much a princess as Yvette, so she didn't need to be scared. The maid then added that anything goes, and asked if the little one wanted to punish her older sister. Iris was totally down, but she was worried about her maid, and Siana told her not to sweat it. Siana promised she'd teach her everything, show her exactly how to do it, because she knows the princess real well by now. Then she asked the little girl why it happened, and Iris guessed it was because she's younger than Yvette. The girl couldn't even believe it was all because of age, and that she had such a low title. So Siana asked how you even determine a title. Iris explained that it's the difference between having something or not, and Yvette's got power, wealth, and support, unlike her. So, the maid asked her again, making sure the kid understood exactly why this happened. Iris realized the maid had a mom, and then Siana added she needed to win over adults to get stronger. The maid explained that it was the fastest, most realistic way for the princess to influence the royal family. The maid also promised to always have her back, but she needed to find someone with major power first. The girl didn't know how to find him, but Siana said there was one way, and he'd probably side with her. Meanwhile, a guard reported to the emperor that the maid had been sneaking around. People saw her leaving in a carriage. Sol also guessed she went to see Princess Yvette, which made Rasheed furious that he hadn't been told about this before. The guard stopped him, explaining what could happen if he interfered in the rivalry between the two princesses. He added that Siana could get hurt too, and Iris is her boss. Plus, she's a contender for the throne. Sol also added the crown prince is a strong candidate, so the princesses probably won't even bother competing. He even said his own mom would want it. But the guy shot back that Sol was a good friend, but he wasn't gonna listen to that crap. The guard then apologized to His Majesty for what he said, while Rasheed was thinking that Siana genuinely cared about Iris regardless. He was still bugged about why he cared so much. Then he remembered that even back when he was a teen, he was already a top contender for the throne. no matter how much people supported him. There was one person in the empire who was way stronger. That was Empress Goldria, and because of that woman, his power was basically meaningless. Meanwhile, Siana was also explaining to the princess that the strongest person around was Empress Goldria. She was the one the girl needed to get on her side. But the princess had no idea how to do that. She figured the empress wouldn't want to meet. But Siana explained they'd create a situation where Goldria would want to meet. The woman revealed that the empress had another daughter, but she died from poisoning before she even turned 10. That same poison was used on the current emperor. And the story is, the young princess accidentally swallowed it and died. And instead of mourning her dead daughter, Her Majesty decided to cover the whole thing up. Of course, she punished those who tried to kill her daughter and son, and used it as an excuse to take out her political enemies. In the end, she strengthened the prince's allies and made him the current emperor. But that wasn't all. Siana suggested that even though Goldria seems like a heartless person, every mom's heart aches for her daughter. That woman distanced herself from her own son because of it, and then, over time, completely withdrew into herself. The girl could already picture the old empress being delivered the news about the little princess. And even though Eris was still sure it was hopeless, Siana kept assuring her that this was a golden opportunity for them. Then she asked the little girl to write a letter, saying how much she missed her mother. Soon this letter was delivered to Her Majesty Goldria. But when she read it, she immediately tore it in half. But they didn't give up at the Ruby Palace, and soon Aris sent the Empress another letter. Goldria didn't even bother reading them, just ordered them tossed right away. She did the same with the next few. The kid kept writing, knowing she was getting rejected every time, but she never stopped hoping to meet her. Finally, the Empress decided to actually read one of the little princess's letters. Following Siana's plan, the letter even had a peach scent, which was a little childish. Siana knew Goldria was old school, so it'd be better to use more elegant language. But she asked Aris to write to the Empress like a granddaughter who thought she was like a spring flower. The girl was still young, and she didn't get how old people could like that kind of stuff. Siana just asked for patience, and soon they got a reply in the style of the great poet the Empress favored. The maid was overjoyed that all their hard work on the letters hadn't been for nothing and had finally paid off. Eris just told the maid to keep it down and asked how long they had to keep writing these dumb letters. The girl told the princess not to worry, totally confident the Empress would summon her any minute now. She also noticed she wrote like Ruby Palace. While Goldria asked the maid what this princess even looked like, Siana, the maid, was still waiting for an answer when Eris hurried down from upstairs in her new dress. Next thing you know, the girl tripped and tumbled down the stairs, sprawled out at the bottom, and Siana freaked out. The maid didn't get why she was in such a rush, but the princess just held out an envelope to her. The servant wasn't sure what the letter was about, and then Aris explained her grandma had invited her to the palace. Soon they were ready and arrived to meet the Empress, where the princess politely thanked her for the invitation. Goldria greeted her granddaughter in a kinda dry voice, but it was obvious she wasn't happy to see her. Then the girl went up to her and explained that she'd prepared a small gift as a token of her gratitude. Pulling out a small bottle, the princess explained they were tea leaves made from acacia blossoms. Eris heard the Empress loved floral teas, so she brewed one up special just for her. Then, the little tyke humbly asked her grandma to accept the gift, if she was cool with it. Goldria noticed the girl really did have the look, and she saw those violet eyes, just like His Highness. Even though Aris was the youngest of the whole family, those eyes screamed royal blood. Then the Empress admitted it was a one-of-a-kind gift and invited her granddaughter to have a cup with her. Soon, as they were sitting at the table, Her Majesty remarked that the tea was seriously delicious. The princess thanked her, super happy her grandma liked it, and then they kept chatting. Just like in the letters they'd been sending, Aris didn't complain about her life and praised the Empress. Their conversations were kinda pointless, but the sight of the two of them was pretty damn extravagant. They both silently set down their cups, stirring their tea with a spoon and holding back smiles while they drank. Aristia nailed court etiquette, flawless, no complaints. She even covered her mouth sometimes when she talked. The kid was reciting poems in this delicate voice, posture perfect, everything learned just for today. Aristia also mentioned how pretty the garden flowers were, and Goldria decided she could have any she wanted. That totally made the princess's day, and she thanked Her Majesty again, flashing this adorable smile. The Empress thought to herself what a beautiful child she was, then announced it was getting late and dismissed her. The princess looked all flustered and started apologizing for taking up so much of Her Majesty's time. Then the little one thanked her one last time and headed back to her palace, hoping everything went okay. That reminded Goldria of how her own daughter used to apologize for bothering her and then leave. Her imperial kid always gave her this sweet, genuine smile, and she'd never forget it. It also just crushed Her Majesty that her girl died so young, and it's haunted her all these years. And then she looked closer at little Eris again, and was even more convinced she looked just like her. Back at the palace, Siana noticed the princess seemed lost in thought, so she asked her what was up. Eris explained that she used to think the empress was someone without tears or blood, but now she saw that wasn't true. The maid then noticed that the princess's personality had changed a lot, and she was playing such a cute kid that it was hard not to smile. Still, there was one problem: the guilt. And if it hurt Eris this much, it was better not to do it again. Siana asked if the girl felt guilty about deceiving the countess, and Eris admitted that she didn't feel that way at all. Eris explained that while they were together, the countess hadn't asked her a single thing about the princess during their whole conversation. After all, a girl who'd lost her mother should be interesting in some way, like her beauty or her knowledge, right? But for Goldria, what mattered way more was how much the little girl looked like her deceased daughter. If that woman knew the real her, there's no way she'd be smiling so sweetly at this little girl. So, yeah, the princess basically feels like telling her grandma to go to hell. It even pissed her off a little, but after she calmed down, she asked the maid how well she'd done today. Siana admitted that the little one had done great, that she was proud of her, and Eris, hearing that praise, threw her arms around the maid. The maid, meanwhile, realized that instead of finding support for the princess, she was making her lose herself. She also thought now that this plan was way too cruel, but she didn't have any other choice. Recently, she bumped into His Majesty again, late at night in the garden, and immediately thanked him for his help. The girl explained that thanks to him, she was able to get what she wanted. And then she decided to ask him something. Siana wanted to know something about the deceased daughter of the emperor's mother, and he just couldn't refuse her. But that's how the girl found out about the countess's daughter from the crown prince, and the empress's memories are tied to what the dead princess looked like. Also, that she really loved the smell of acacia, what color dresses she liked to wear, and what poems she liked to read. This would seriously mess with the empress's head, and that's all it'd take to trigger a grieving mother. That's how Empress Goldria will fall head over heels for a fake version of her dead daughter. Siana asked the prince how she could repay him for his help, but he said she didn't need to do anything. All he wanted to know was, out of everyone in the palace, why did she pick Empress Goldria? Rasheed then clarified it was just a question, and he was genuinely curious, that's all. Siana admitted that back when she was just trying to survive as a powerless princess, this was her plan. She figured she could find some support, so she started digging up dirt on the imperial family. Just like now, she wanted to leverage the empress's grief over her lost daughter. The plans were similar. Thinking about it now, Siana realized she never stood a chance of reaching the empress from that far away, so she wasn't cut out for the job. But thanks to His Majesty's help, she managed to get to the empire. So, Princess Eris managed to pull off that plan instead. And it's all thanks to the emperor. Rasheed asked if she blamed him for everything, but she confessed she blamed the family who abused her. But instead of getting depressed, she just kept scheming how to escape, and now she's totally stoked. The emperor thought it was seriously weird that she wasn't blaming her family's killer, but was actually psyched. Plus, he thought her face was kinda cute, but there was also something savage about it. Now Siana knew that if her plan worked, it was time to move on to the next stage. Soon, Yvette got another letter from her little sister and decided the girl had completely lost it. After a while, she visited her, and Eris thanked her for accepting her invitation and being her guest for tea. Yvette was genuinely surprised, because just 3 months ago, this girl looked like a beggar, but now she'd totally changed. Then the fifth princess asked her to pour some tea, and explained that this time she wanted the maid to serve her. And Yvette reminded the maid that she'd screwed up last time, asking if she even realized what she'd done wrong. Knowing she was just some low-level maid, she figured it'd be easy to get under her skin. Siana poured the tea perfectly, but then Yvette decided to complain about why she was staring at her. The maid just apologized, but the fifth princess kept insisting she was blatantly glaring at her. Then, Yvette decided the maid was mad at her, but Siana denied it. After that, the princess explained to her little sister that this maid needed to be taught a lesson, since she didn't learn it last time. Then she ordered a whip to be brought, but Iris demanded her sister stop, saying she wouldn't forgive her if she touched Siana again. Yvette just got angrier, not understanding why the brat was counting on Granny's help, and now dared to act this way towards her. She admitted she knew everything, and then decided to share something the little girl didn't know. Yvette asked why Eris thought she could rely on the Empress, even if she was His Majesty's biological mother. She also said that the person the girl was relying on was powerless, since the Emperor hadn't spoken to her in ages. The fifth princess confessed that everyone knew Rasheed taking the throne was a done deal, except little Eris. She couldn't wait to see that woman fall, and thought the kid was just dumb for picking someone who was buttering her up. That's when Her Majesty showed up, surprised to hear such filthy words coming from a young lady's mouth. Yvette was completely stunned and lost her voice for a second. Not understanding why the Empress was there, Eris immediately ran to her grandma and tried to explain, while the Empress asked what was going on. The little one explained she was having her first tea party and invited her sister, but figured she messed up and admitted she was ashamed now. Then the little princess also pointed out there wasn't an adult in her palace who could teach her things properly. The Empress looked at the girl, realizing she didn't have a mother, and promised she would help her. While Yvette was wondering how Goldria dared show up, she started scolding her for insulting a child. She yelled that the fifth princess was totally looking down on the kid, while treating Eris like some innocent little lamb. Then, Her Majesty snatched the whip and laid into that so-called princess's hands. She'd heard Yvette was trying to punish a maid, so she decided to show her how it's done. That's when the fifth princess started claiming she was His Majesty's descendant, so Goldria couldn't touch her without the Emperor's permission. But Her Majesty was like, "How dare this chick threaten me with my own son?" And that just set her off. The Empress told Yvette she could ask anyone what they thought about it, for all she cared. Even if her son disagreed with her decision, he still wouldn't ignore his sister's disgusting behavior. Then she ordered Yvette to hurry up and lift her dress, and she couldn't disobey the command. The next thing she knew, she got a smack on the ankles, which made her lose it and call Goldria a crazy old hag. After that, she got another smack, even more painful, and started screaming that her mom wouldn't let her get away with this. That's when she showed up and immediately wanted to know what the hell was going on. But seeing the Empress, she just thanked her for personally taking charge of her daughter's education. Then she told Yvette to thank the Dowager Empress immediately as well. The fifth princess couldn't believe it. She honestly never thought things would end up like this. Still, she bowed before Her Majesty, thanked her, and admitted that it was all her fault. Soon, Eris was happy that her sister turned out to be so useful, even though she'd made her sweat a bit beforehand. Siana was also glad she'd asked for her help before leaving, but she wondered if the little one was okay. She confessed that she wanted to ask her something. She was curious why her mother was forced to die. The girl learned from the records that when she'd begged for help, no one had lifted a finger. Her mom was really sick at the time, but for some reason, the doctor refused to come and examine her. Eris didn't dare ask her grandma about it now, knowing she really needed her. And besides, a princess wouldn't ask stuff like that. Siana saw the little one was super bummed and explained that it was okay to cry if she needed to. Siana, even though she hoped Eris's heart wouldn't be broken, knew there was a wound there that couldn't be healed. The girl, still crying, screamed that she hated everyone and wanted them all dead, and the maid figured her plan had flopped. The former subject who seduced the Emperor not only got his favor, but also became a member of the imperial family. Back then, she was already pregnant and worried that the Emperor's mother would turn her back on her, like everyone else had. After Goldria announced she wanted nothing to do with His Majesty, Rosemary gave birth to a child. It was a beautiful princess, and the palace was decked out with jewels and packed with people. The palace, at that moment, was far from reality, and Rosemary apologized to her daughter that all that was really here was hypocrisy and malice. Now, even though the palace was a battlefield, Siana wanted to use the person who killed the princess's mother. She knew the kid didn't owe her any affection, so she just hugged the girl, feeling super sorry for her. Then Aris hugged the maid herself, asking what the next step was, making it clear she was going to milk this old hag for all she's worth. The maid knew that even though it was twisted and cruel, they'd be boosting the power of the princess and the Emperor's mother. After a while, Goldria got worried that her granddaughter hadn't visited since that tea party, so she decided to drop in on her. When she got to the Ruby Palace, the maid reported that someone had tried to poison Princess Eris. The Empress rushed straight to her granddaughter, and Siana added that the little one had received a poisoned dessert as a gift. Luckily, the poison wasn't lethal and wouldn't last long, and the doctor assured them that the girl would recover soon. Still, the princess's body was weak, and there's been no improvement yet, and Siana also confessed that she couldn't reach Her Majesty. The maid started apologizing, but the Empress told her to stop, knowing that she was the one to blame. And then she hugged the little girl, asking her to get well soon and not to worry about a thing. Yvette even heard the news and was stoked that her sister couldn't even get out of bed. She claimed it was because she was talking back and explained that's what happens to people who try to scare her. While she was sharing this with her mom, a servant came in and reported that the Emperor's mother had sent her a gift. Goldria asked that it be conveyed that it was for her favorite granddaughter and that she wanted them to forget what happened together. But the dessert was really a warning that all of Yvette's actions would come back to bite her. The Empress also requested that the princess eat every last bite, since she poured her heart and soul into that dessert. Taking Her Majesty's warning to heart, Yvette and her mother vanished from the history of the imperial family forever. After that, Goldria often visited Eris and took care of her, so she would recover quickly. The girl explained that she was already much better and and there was no need for the Empress to visit her so often. Her Majesty understood that the girl needed to rest and promised that she would visit her a little later. This tea's kinda bitter, Eris thought, and the maid explained it's 'cause of the medicinal herbs they put in. The princess didn't get why she was acting like she was on death's door, and the maid said poisoning is seriously no joke. Eris was like, it was just a little tummy ache, saying a vet sent her stuff like this all the time. She also admitted she usually just tossed it, but now she figured she could use it to her advantage. Plus, Eris wanted to use her grandma, and when the time was right, she'd ask why she never helped her mom. The little kid thought she was being a bad person, but she was still glad things were working out for her now. And the maid told her, you just can't survive in the imperial palace if you're trying to be good. Then, the princess hugged her maid again and begged her to never leave her side. Right then, Siana remembered again asking Rasheed what she could do to repay him for his help. He kept saying he didn't need anything, but she kept pushing, and he couldn't think of a single thing to ask for. So, he asked the maid to move into his palace, and Siana froze for a second, totally lost for words. A little later, these twin maids showed up, carrying a bunch of dresses for the princess to try on. Siana checked them out and thought pink would look good on Eris, but blue would look even better. The maid was kinda stumped, seeing that both outfits were gorgeous, and now she couldn't pick which dress was best. But then the princess came out and told those maids to stop bothering her own maid. They agreed, and then started asking Eris herself which dress she liked the most. The girl declared that anything she wore would look amazing on her, and the seamstresses agreed. They were even surprised how sharp she was at such a young age, and Eris confirmed that, yeah, she's pretty smart. After they left, the princess got all angry, muttering that she hates all women except Siana. But the maid explained to her that if they wanted to stay together for a long time, they'd need help from other people. She also said it was in case the princess needed something and she was busy, or just as a backup. Then Siana promised she'd find maids who would love the little one as much as she did. After that, twins named Nini and Nana were sent to the palace, where they'd be working from now on. They swore they'd serve the princess faithfully, and Siana explained they could be trusted since they were Choo-Choo's friends. But the girl didn't like that they looked identical, because she wouldn't be able to tell who was who. Days went by, and the new maids kept gushing over the princess, saying she was beautiful and elegant. They also took good care of Eris, explaining she had to stay healthy and maintain her grace. Siana was happy that everything was going well, and the princess was growing up to be a pretty confident girl. She herself was going to visit the prince, where they prepared a dessert for her, since she was considered an honored guest. The maids were so committed to taking good care of her, until His Majesty the Emperor arrived. Meanwhile, the maid looked around and noticed that with its high ceilings, the living room felt more like a garden. What felt even weirder to her was that she, a regular maid, was now being entertained like a VIP aristocrat. Soon, His Highness arrived, showing up with a few of his pets and giving her a sweet smile. Siana told him he looked kinda strange, but Rasheed explained he was just taking a walk with his adorable little buddies. He also admitted that's why he was late, and now he was gonna properly welcome his guest. Then the Emperor stood up, gave a slight bow, and expressed his gratitude for her coming to his palace. But the girl asked him to get straight to the point and not hesitate to ask her for something in return for his services. Siana explained that the princess was waiting for her, and then the Emperor decided to get down to business and explain what he needed. Then Rasheed, smiling, added that he really wanted to treat the maid to some dessert and offered her a piece. The girl was surprised that was all he wanted, but let him put the piece in her mouth, and the taste was amazing. The prince explained the dessert was made from top-shelf ingredients, and it's got this amazing fruity aroma. Siana figured the palace had a seriously skilled chef, but Rasheed confessed he made the whole thing himself. That made the maid practically choke, and the Emperor thought she hated it, but she explained she was just super surprised. Then, His Highness admitted he loves to cook, and it's also a way for him to spend time with Siana. Right then, the girl couldn't believe. This was the Crown Prince, the guy they said was totally heartless. His Majesty also confessed he's a sucker for cute little critters, because they just make you happy looking at them. And Siana, watching His Highness at that moment, remembered a story and decided to share it with the prince. She told him about a princess from the Winter Kingdom, who, despite all her grandeur, absolutely hated the cold. This princess couldn't even leave her bedroom with the fireplace blazing, until a bird flew to her and took pity on her. The bird wanted to snip off a piece of the sun and give it to the princess, and soon the girl received this gift. That lucky ray of sun finally helped the princess find a way out of the room. The Emperor couldn't believe it was true, but the maid swore that it was. Siana also admitted that the story came from her hometown, then asked where the prince knew it from. His Majesty confessed that someone told him when he was a kid, but sadly, he can't remember who. Rasheed thought it was the only clue. but he eventually realized he was wrong. On the way home, Siana still couldn't figure out where the prince knew that story from, since she made it up as a kid. Plus, she only told it to one person, and couldn't believe that person was the crown prince back then. After a while, the girl met up with her friend Choo-Choo again, and thanked her for sending her friends. Siana explained that she saved a whole hour because of it, and also noticed that Choo-Choo had become an official maid. She thought she just got lucky, but she understood that she was a pretty capable worker. While the other maids were busy explaining what her triceps were good for, she got invited to Princess Grace's palace. This princess was royalty, so Choo-Choo, feeling like a total country bumpkin, was a little thrown. Then she remembered the promotion exams were happening too, and realized Siana didn't even know. Judging by her friend's face, Choo-Choo figured she didn't want to take it. But the maid explained it had only been a year since her appointment. Right then, her friend started insisting she didn't know anyone more capable than Siana, and was sure she'd ace it. Choo-Choo also added that it had broadened her horizons, and passing the exams would give her more authority. Plus, a raise. Siana realized then she and her friend could eat anything they wanted. But what really got the girl pumped was the thought of buying awesome gifts for Princess Eris. Siana even pictured herself quitting being a maid after all that, and opening up her own little shop. The girl agreed, even though she had no clue how it'd go. And when she showed up for the exam, she found out her name wasn't on the list. The twins explained to Siana that it was because she was a foreigner, and folks like them didn't get recognized as mid-level maids. Even with her killer skills and tons of experience, she and a few others still got passed over for promotions. This is gonna make things tough for them. They're already getting worked to the bone and paid peanuts. When Princess Aris found out they failed the exam because of that crap, she went ballistic and vowed to fight the decision. But Sina begged her not to, saying it was already settled. But the little Spitfire wasn't backing down. The maid kept pushing, adding that Aris shouldn't bring it up with her grandma, cause it could seriously backfire on her. The girl started pleading with the princess not to stress so much over her, and said she'd get another shot someday. But soon that chance came knocking, only she bombed the exam because she was too skilled. Still, the examiner had an offer for her, and she was gonna put in a good word with the Dowager Empress. If everything goes smooth, then the teacher can bump Siana up to a mid-level maid. The Empress was flawless, especially compared to the Emperor's 4 concubines. Any one of those girls could have been Empress, and now one of them is asking Siana for a favor. The girl knew it was a request she couldn't refuse, and that's when the youngest wife, Angela, came out. This lady looked way younger and more innocent than the maid expected, and she greeted her guest right away. Siana didn't waste any time either, bowing politely and saying it was a pleasure to meet her. Angela learned the maid was 18 and remarked on her excellent manners, even though she hadn't been working long. She also noticed Siana was as modest as she'd been told, admitting she was curious since she worked for Princess Eris. Then she added that Goldria was currently turning a castaway into the perfect princess. After, Angela asked the maid to follow her, requesting that what she was about to see must stay a secret forever. In the room, a little boy was playing with a robot, and the lady explained that this was her son, named Lacey. Then she had the maid start training him, but she wasn't expecting him to be another Aris. After that, Angela asked Siana to think over her offer and give her an answer, and the girl promised she would. She also noticed this kid was different from the others, but there wasn't a single word about Angela's son in the records. She brought it up with His Majesty, hoping he'd heard something about the boy. Siana also added that it was Lacey, the 4th prince, and he'd be 12 this year. Since he lived outside the palace because his father wasn't interested in his kids, there wasn't much info on him. The boy's staying at Marquis Wilhelm's estate for educational purposes, and there were also rumors of some kind of scandal involving that empress's wife. The emperor figured the kid had some issues they were trying to hide, so they wouldn't let him see him. Angela wasn't letting anyone see her son anyway, and no one in the palace had seen him since he was born. Still, the lady intended to officially introduce Lacey to the imperial palace when he turned 12. Rasheed realized then that if even the maid was asking questions, something was definitely up with the kid. He admitted he was actually stoked, because he thought she was just there to see him. Siana wanted to ask His Majesty something else, but he repeated that she shouldn't worry about the 4th prince. The maid then stated that she still needed to think about it, because the boy needed her help. Anyway, she got some intel from Rasheed and wondered how she could repay him. He explained that Siana had already repaid him, and then added that Princess Aris would be worried. Later, the maid told the little girl that she'd been offered to tutor the prince, but Aris immediately flew into a rage. She declared she'd never allow it, and insisted that as her only mistress, she wouldn't let her leave. Siana then explained that she wanted to become a mid-level maid, so she had to take this chance. Lady Angela can break through the wall that she herself can't. because of her social status. On top of that, the maid was worried about rumors if she became a third-tier servant, so Eris decided to give her half a day off. The kid admitted she didn't want Siana to do it, but she also didn't want to take away her shot at it either. The maid thanked the princess, knowing she'd be able to do way more stuff later than she could now. That's when the twins came up to Eris, promising they wouldn't let her get bored. But she wasn't feeling that idea. But what calmed the little one down was knowing Siana would still take care of her until she became a mid-level maid. The servant understood that even though she wasn't that great at it, she'd do whatever it took to help the Empress. Angela was stoked she agreed, but she also knew she was probably thrown off by the sudden request. The girl couldn't even believe her mistress was thanking a maid, then asked her to hammer out all the details. Siana explained that the lessons would be 5 hours a day, right up until the boy's birthday. If the results are good during that time, her mistress would bump the maid up to mid-tier. Angela was a little surprised, because she figured the witch would want precious stones, but it was clear she was way greedier than that. The girl explained her greed was directly proportional to the help she'd provide to get the best results. Then the maid asked how long the prince had been like this, and the Empress decided to tell her everything from the beginning. As soon as the boy was born, the Emperor was ecstatic and praised his wife, saying she'd done a great job. After that, he declared that Angela would be Empress, and Marquis Wilhelm would be more powerful than ever. The Emperor was also planning to give the kid to a wet nurse, so his wife could relax for a while. A little later, a servant came to her looking worried and explained that His Highness had become kind of off. She explained that he never made eye contact and didn't respond to his name, but Angela demanded they stop calling her son weird. Angela brought this up with the Emperor, and he allowed her to rest and recover outside the castle. He also promised that he'd heal their child no matter what, and his wife suggested he come with her. But His Majesty said that would start rumors everywhere, and declared that Prince Lacey needed to get better and wise up. The Emperor also made it clear that the boy could only return to the palace when he became the perfect prince. Years later, Angela accidentally saw her father trying to tutor the boy himself and got really scared. He just started yelling at her for daring to come to the estate without permission. Angela thought her father wanted to make Lacey look like an idiot at the first banquet, so he'd never become emperor. The Marquis also told her that no matter what he did, the prince still didn't understand anything and refused to act like a person. The young lady was really worried, but knew she had to find a way out. And a few days ago, she came for Lacey. That day, the moment came when she could take her son, but she wasn't allowed to be called his parent. Her father, the Marquis, promised he'd be back for Lacey's birthday, and she was afraid he'd find out the boy had been here the whole time. Now Angela was hoping for the maid's help, because if her father saw the boy had gotten smarter, he wouldn't blame her. This situation's way worse than Siana thought. She knew the lady had it rough, but the kid's the priority now, and she swore she'd do everything she could. After signing the contract, she knew she had to try even harder, then asked where the prince was. Angela explained that His Highness is super sensitive, but only notices what's right in front of him. The biggest problem, though, is that it's impossible to connect with him. Siana walked up to him, tried to talk, said the weather was nice, and held out her hand, but the boy barely reacted, so the maid told the lady that he wasn't sick, just born this way. She also explained that since he isn't sick, there's no cure for him either. Still, Siana added, there's a way to slightly improve his condition, and even if it's tough, she'll help the lady. Angela was shocked, but agreed to anything just to make her boy better. The lady was worried because she was used to taking care of her son all by herself, without a maid, and had never looked for help before. Still, she had asked Siana to tutor him, but she didn't get why she was only planning to spend a month with the prince. The girl explained that she had spent a long time tutoring a princess, so she'd share all the knowledge that could help. And Angela, even though she's accepting the maid's help, shouldn't give up her kid. A mother is the one who should raise her child, but she wasn't sure she could take care of him properly, and she was also afraid Lacey might not like it. Siana begged the lady not to give up or lose hope. If she didn't, she would succeed and get a great result. Angela promised the maid she'd try, but she still kept worrying, and even deep breaths weren't helping much. Then she went to her son's room to see what he was up to, and he was playing with a toy. Like always, the lady noticed the blocks behind him were crooked, and remembering that Lacey hates when things are uneven, she decided to fix them. But the boy gets super mad when someone touches his stuff, and his mother apologized to him. She knew he'd worked his butt off to build this town, but she could tell he was still bored out of his mind. Angela tried to treat him to some goodies, but the kid hated sweets, and he wasn't comfortable with long talks either. Lacey didn't even like listening to music. Loud noises bugged him. And then it hit her. He used to love to draw. Lady thought kids should do what they enjoy, and she hoped this would finally do the trick. She also remembered that when she felt alone and couldn't stop crying, drawing was the only thing that calmed her down. Even though she wasn't exactly skilled, she found it fun, and now she noticed Lacey was getting into it too. Before long, after the boy spent some time with a brush in his hand, he whipped up an amazing painting. Angela was blown away and thought he wasn't just a genius, but a once-in-a-century genius, with a talent most people can only dream of. She still couldn't believe that a kid who'd never been taught anything like this could paint something so incredible. Plus, the boy was totally focused on his work and didn't get distracted by anything for half the day. Even though it wasn't for long, Lacey didn't even glance at his own mom once. Then Siana explained to her that if the boy hated her, he would have just freaked out and run away. But the fact that he didn't means the prince is comfortable being around her. But suddenly, Angela saw her son smash the easel, and she got really scared. But the maid explained that's how he shows he's upset. Siana asked her to really look at the boy, and pointed out he wasn't trying to hurt himself or anyone else. Lacey was just frustrated, and the maid suggested she go over and hug him. Angela agreed, and believed that even if the prince didn't understand her, he could feel her warmth and know she was on his side. Then she hugged the boy to show him her affection, and in those hugs, he understood that she was his mommy. Afterwards, Angela admitted she had no idea that hugging him and comforting him would calm him down so quickly and make him so affectionate. She admitted she really didn't know her son well, and that day the boy fell asleep pretty early because he was exhausted. Angela thanked the maid and let her go, and the maid promised to come back tomorrow. Back at the palace, Siana learned the princess was going on a picnic with the twins. Eris also noticed the maid was tired and promised to bother her tomorrow after work. The girl watched them go, happy the little girl was pleased, and then she bumped into His Majesty again. Rashid was about to confess he just missed her, but Sul corrected him, saying they came for the tea leaves that arrived a few days ago. He didn't argue with his old friend, and then Siana offered to brew them some tea, and the prince asked a guard to take his pets for a walk. Saul understood what His Majesty was hinting at and didn't argue, and the prince then asked how Lacey's training was going. Rashid admitted he was just curious if the maid could do in 2 weeks what the Marquise couldn't do in 5 years. He explained the kid couldn't maintain eye contact, plus he'd heard he likes to scream like a maniac. Siana explained that His Highness wasn't very stable yet, but he was getting much better and would soon bless everyone with his smile. Rashid still didn't get why she was so sure about this, and the maid explained she'd seen it before. The girl confessed her stepmom's son, her brother, looked a lot like the prince, even though his condition was worse. He didn't understand what people told him, and he wasn't exactly talented, just like the prince. They even considered sending him to a monastery at first, but then his condition improved, and it was all thanks to his mom's deep and genuine love. She believed that by her side, her son would thrive and be way happier than anywhere else. Now, Siana's brother is gone. She admitted he was also cruel and tormented her and the other maids. That's why the girl decided to tell His Majesty everything, and she also confessed she doesn't feel anything about her family members' deaths. Either way, what's more important to her right now is that the prince's condition is improving every day. Siana also believed that at this rate, he'll be able to carry himself with dignity by his birthday. A little later, Angela explained to her son that he should repeat after her, and if he succeeded, she'd kiss him and give him new paints. Soon, the kid was able to repeat that he was the 4th prince, Lacey, and thanked everyone for coming to his birthday. Angela was super happy her son nailed it, and gushed about how smart he was. Siana saw the results and admitted the lady had done an amazing job, and Lacey worked his butt off too. Then the maid explained to Angela that this was it for now, but Angela protested, saying the party was still 3 days away. Siana also explained that Prince Lacey is who he is, and that's the real him, but he's still too young and sensitive, and his mom's too soft to stand up to all those people. So Siana decided to offer her a suggestion. The girl explained that the banquet celebrating the prince's birthday should be postponed for another year. But Angela was worried that if she didn't present Lacey this time, he could lose his title. Just then, a panicked maid ran into the room and announced that Marquis Wilhelm had arrived. The lady freaked out, and Wilhelm was already trying to bust in, yelling at them not to dare hold him back. The maids told him he needed permission to enter the Empress's palace, but he just threw them out. Without even a hello, he walked up to his daughter and announced he had important business, then asked where the prince was. Angela immediately started explaining that Lacey was lonely back at the estate, so she couldn't leave him alone. Then she brought him to the imperial palace, where she started tutoring him with the help of a talented maid. They managed to improve his condition, and Angela hoped her father would appreciate it, but he also suggested postponing the banquet. He even added that if this didn't work, they could just announce the prince had died in an accident. Still, he couldn't do that to his own grandson, and he was glad he didn't have to worry about that problem anymore. Then the Marquis told his daughter not to worry, because he knew how to help Lacey now. He explained that with magic, someone could control the prince throughout the banquet, and they could fool the guest. The Marquis also explained that they just didn't have any other choice, since it was the only way to meet expectations. He assured his daughter it was just temporary for the banquet. Then he'd get back to training the kid himself. Now the Marquis was sure he could protect not only the family's honor, but Lacey's honor too. Angela begged her father not to, saying it wasn't necessary anymore, and she didn't want to do something so awful to her son. But he yelled that she needed to face reality, saying he didn't want to resort to this either. Then, entering the room, the Marquis saw the boy peacefully drawing some picture, but Grandpa was determined to take him, and he didn't even stop when his daughter fell to his feet, begging. Angela was terrified something bad might happen to her son, but her father just shoved her aside. Then, he grabbed the little prince, who, scared out of his mind, started calling for his mommy to protect him. But the lady couldn't disobey her father. She'd always played the obedient daughter, a role she couldn't even remember now. She had to be the perfect lady to survive. And when they laced her corset, she wasn't allowed to make a sound. Then it hit her. She remembered how stoked her dad was that they'd snagged her the perfect match, Emperor's fourth wife. But the truth was, Angela was just straight up terrified and silently praying someone would save her ass. Now she knew she had to protect at least her kid, and she instantly lunged at her father, demanding he let go of her son. She told him he wasn't taking him, period, and declared from now on, the prince stays with her, end of discussion. The Marquis thought his daughter was acting like a damn empress, and realized he'd been way too nice to her. Then he explained that even with a crown on her head, she was still his daughter, and that hadn't changed. The Marquis was pissed that when he was trying to protect his family, Angela decided to start a rebellion. He slapped her across the face, but then soldiers swarmed him, yelling that he dared lay a hand on a member of the royal family. Siana rushed to Angela to calm her down, explaining that these guys were just trying to kick her dad out. And she decided right then and there to order the soldiers to throw that guy in the slammer, and do it now. Even locked up in the dungeon, the Marquis was screaming at the guards, claiming his daughter was the empress of this whole country. He also yelled that those soldiers, his daughter, and that nasty little maid would pay for this, for bringing such shame on him. That's when he noticed that very maid approaching him, but he told her not to even think about begging for forgiveness. But Siana explained that she wasn't there to ask for forgiveness, but to deliver a message from her lady. The girl remembered explaining to Angela that she'd already prepped the guards, having noticed the Marquis was in a foul mood. Then she'd come running the second she heard that guy threatening his own daughter and the prince. And since the maid witnessed the whole thing, the Marquis was caught red-handed and thrown in the slammer. Angela then declared she wouldn't let her father manipulate her or her son anymore. Then she asked her to tell him that he'd better not show his face at the Imperial Palace again, unless she gave him permission. Angela also wanted him to know that she'd be raising Lacey from now on. But the Marquis just got pissed that his daughter sent a servant to tell him all this. He started demanding they bring Angela here, but Siana pointed out she's not just the empress, she's the prince's mother. Her insulting her was basically a slap in the face to the emperor, so the Marquis is now considered a traitor. And if he doesn't want to carry that traitor label, he better take Her Majesty's advice, because it might be his last chance. The Marquis decided to agree, knowing rumors would spread that he couldn't control his daughter. But first, he needed to get out of here. Then the girl handed him a document that'd prove he was agreeing to all the terms. But the Marquis just got even angrier. He still believed Angela was weak and stupid, and wouldn't have the guts to do something like this to her own father. The Marquis figured someone put her up to it, then realized it was that maid, and was sure his daughter wouldn't have done anything without her. Also, he was dying to know how the banquet would go, and how they planned on introducing Prince Lacey to the public. Wilhelm was claiming that without his help, they'd just screw everything up, and then they'd regret it. He signed the document anyway, then left, and Siana reported this to Angela, who praised the maid for it. But now they had to worry about the prince's banquet, and the lady said she was cool with just canceling it. She figured all she'd have to deal with then was some side-eye from people, and her dad getting pissed. That's it. As soon as the banquet got canned, rumors started flying that the little prince was nuts and couldn't be seen in public. People were also saying he was cursed by some nasty witch, and even thought Angela was gonna ditch him. The noblewomen kept telling her that the longer she put off explaining things, the harder it would be to dump him later. They didn't know how to help her with the prince, and just kept asking questions, insisting that everything would be fine after. But Angela asked them, even though her kid was different, to at least be polite. She explained that her son wasn't crazy, just special, and that's when the nobles couldn't figure out why she canceled the banquet. The lady explained she was going to introduce Lacey to the world outside the palace when he was ready for it. But the noblewomen were telling her that she was shirking her duties, and that the prince wouldn't be able to claim the throne. Even knowing all the risks, Angela was still going to go through with it. because she wanted her son to have a happy life. Her friends got it, totally understood, and promised to handle everything else, so she thanked them. No matter what condition Lacey was in, nobody would dare make fun of a noble emperor's lineage. That settled the rumor problem, but people still kept whispering behind their backs. The nobles started gossiping that if His Majesty returned and found out about this, Angela would be in deep trouble. Siana assured Her Majesty that wouldn't happen, explaining that in this situation, the rumors would have reached the emperor a long time ago. She added that if he wasn't back yet, there was no need to worry so much. Plus, her financial situation hadn't changed. That meant her family still had her back, and the rumors would die down soon enough. Like always, now Angela realized she dragged Siana into her mess, and out of gratitude, declared that she would fulfill her promise. After thanking Her Majesty, the maid returned to the Ruby Palace, where Princess Aris immediately threw her arms around her. The little girl said she missed her like crazy and swore she'd never let her go again. The kid also confessed she kept studying while she was gone, but then asked if they could go on a picnic together. Aris had dressed up special for it and looked so gorgeous. Siana started worrying someone would snatch her. They picked a secluded spot in the Imperial Palace for their picnic, somewhere quiet and super cozy. The maid was stoked the princess finally got out of the palace, and the princess was happy as a clam. The maids were even playing with her, acting out different fairy tale characters to keep her entertained. While she was skipping around and having fun in the meadow, Aris noticed a boy painting a picture and asked what it was. Meanwhile, back at Rasheed's palace, he was asking a guard when his father would be back, and found out he needed more time to recover. It's been almost 6 months since the prince has been handling things for him, and he knew that was way too long for a simple recovery. Sul also explained that the emperor was having trouble with headaches, and his condition was getting worse every day. The guards swore they were about to get some good news, so Rasheed suggested they take a walk outside. While walking, he ran into that crew from the Ruby Palace, but Aris, being Aris, just assumed her brother was following them. Then, His Majesty spotted Angela there too, which totally surprised him. The lady explained she just stepped out for a short walk with her son and happened to bump into Princess Aris. Right then, Rasheed noticed Lacey stare and figured the kid was about to have his head chopped off. But Angela explained the boy hadn't quite mastered all the etiquette yet and asked him to forgive him. Rasheed still didn't get why he was staring like that, and the prince's mom explained he just wanted to draw his relative. The lady added that Lacey always wants to draw something beautiful when he sees it, and again asked him not to be angry. Aris jumped into the conversation at that point and started insisting her little brother's paintings are super beautiful. Then the girl remembered the first time they met, and Angela started explaining to the kids who was who. Her Majesty was also super stoked to see Siana again, and Siana explained they were just out for a picnic. Then Angela thanked the little princess for letting them hang with Siana for a bit, saying she was a huge help. After that, the Empress promoted the twin maids to mid-level, figuring it was a win-win for everyone. Nini and Nana were at a loss for how to thank her, but she told them to thank their friend instead. That's when they started begging Siana to let them do something for her as a thank you, but she was just happy they took care of Aris. They were still super grateful, because if it weren't for her, they'd still be getting exploited, working like dogs for peanuts. The little princess noticed then that Lacey was drawing, and he was actually really good at it. The kid confessed he only wanted to draw beautiful things, and then Aris asked him to draw her. Soon, the picture came out totally amazing, and it even seemed to have a rose scent coming from it. All the while, the girl was muttering that the other royals only knew how to curse, but Lacey was a straight-up talent. Siana, the maid, backed that up, saying His Highness's skills were seriously off the charts. So, Prince Rasheed decided to ask the kid to draw him himself, because he wanted to see his younger brother's skills firsthand. Then Siana noticed His Majesty seemed to be enjoying posing, but he said he was just messing around. Rasheed also liked that, thanks to this maid, he could get some great tea, and then he asked her to chat with him. He asked her what was so great about drawing, and that's when she handed him a quill and told him to give it a shot. His Majesty agreed and started drawing Siana's portrait, but naturally, all he managed was a funny caricature. Rasheed admitted that this kind of thing wasn't for him, and the maid explained it's important to know what you're good at. She explained that instead of putting everything off till later, he could just give up and not do what he sucks at. Then Siana added that people tend to obsess over what they don't have, so she thought it was important to realize that right away. Better to crush it at what you're good at than stress about what you're bad at. Rasheed just burst out laughing. He finally understood why she went from princess to maid. His Majesty realized she was way happier like this and told her he was happy for her. She wasn't expecting to hear that, even though becoming a mid-level maid was a huge deal for her. It's way harder for a foreigner from a defeated country to pull that off. Easier to grab a star from the sky. But Siana did it, and Rasheed was genuinely happy for her. He had no idea she got that position through some shady stuff, and thanks to Her Majesty. But right now, Siana was feeling butterflies in her stomach. The maid thanked the Emperor for his congratulations, and her smile seemed even sweeter to him. Rasheed suddenly had this urge to wrap her in his arms and never let go. Right when he was lost in his head, the guard soul interrupted, announcing the little prince's drawing was ready. Everyone rushed to see the results and just froze, stunned. The Emperor's portrait was unbelievably gorgeous, like he was about to step right off the page. That's how lifelike it was. Because Lacey really is an artist who got a gift instead of the normal life the devil stole from him. And out of the hundreds of paintings he'll do, the ones that'll go down in history, this one's gonna be one of the greats. Later, Siana got her new uniform, and Aris said she looked like a ripe peach among green leaves. The girl loved the uniform too. It wasn't all worn out like the ones the lower-level maids got. The twins got the same uniforms, and they were totally stoked. Earlier, the princess got a letter from her grandma, who heard her maids were leaving for training. So she's inviting the little one to her palace, so she won't be all alone and bored. Taking advantage of the situation, Eris decided to throw a banquet every single day while she was living in that palace. She'll eat whatever she wants, get whatever she asks for, and generally try to squeeze every last penny out of the old lady. It was time for the maids to leave, and Aris threatened Siana that when she got back, she wouldn't let her out of her arms, and the way she looked at her favorite maid at that moment really made the twins happy. Arriving at their destination, the maids noticed the atmosphere was totally different there. There were a ton of mid-level maids there, but you could feel some kind of tension in the air. Megan came out to greet the newbies and immediately warned them in a slightly annoyed tone that even though they passed the exam, they hadn't officially received their status yet. They'd have 3 weeks of training, and if any questions about their qualifications came up, they'd get demoted again. The maids' duties are strictly divided. The lowest level maids are responsible for cleaning and laundry. They're managed by mid-level maids, making sure the work goes smoothly. Top-tier maids? They're basically serving the lords themselves. They'll each have a designated spot, yeah, but that's just for show. Things get switched up. Even though Siana was experienced, she was hoping the local maids would give her a hand. Then hit her up, reminding her that she's known as the troublemaker from the conquered country. Heard she had support on the outside, but said she'd only be judged on her skills. And starting today, Siana's in charge of prepping ingredients in the kitchen. She better be ready, because if she screws up, they'll rat her out immediately. The girl got the feeling that just didn't like her for no good reason, even though she actually likes being around a bunch of people who have their own systems and ways of doing things. The maid assigned to work with her just told her to watch and figure things out herself. So, Siana heads into the kitchen, greeting everyone right from the doorway. But all eyes were glued to her, and it felt like a cold chill running right through her bones. The atmosphere was super grim, and the maids themselves looked pissed, like straight-up demons. Moving further in, Siana caught a familiar wicked giggle. She turned around and saw Jean, who looked like she was already plotting something. You could tell by her tone that she wasn't thrilled about Siana being there. Not long ago, when they told her about a new mid-level maid, Jean couldn't believe it. Plus, they told her to keep an eye on her, since all the lower-level maids listened to her. And now, Jean was practically green with envy that Siana reached that level in almost no time at all. She couldn't figure out why she hadn't just croaked in that ruby palace. Then Jean started spreading lies, saying Siana used some kind of trickery to get the position. Like they came together, and there's no way she could have made it to the official training stage otherwise. That ginger witch started rumors that Siana was a liar and stubborn as hell, and that she only got promoted because she stabbed her friend in the back. Now, seeing all those looks, Siana realized Jean had been running her name through the mud, but that didn't break her. She boldly announced that she was in charge of these maids from now on, so they better show her some respect, seeing as they couldn't even be bothered to say hello. Then Siana gave him a piece of her mind, the kind of stuff that usually scares people, and Jean just stood there on the sidelines, grinding her teeth with rage. Then she petulantly declared that she wasn't taking orders, since this was her turf. She's back at it again, saying Siana didn't earn her position, and so Gina won't let anyone listen to her. And she even added that caring for the princess gets you nowhere, and everyone thinks Siana's useless here. That's when the redhead caught a well-deserved smack across her arrogant face, and Siana, in a calm voice, announced that everyone's fired if they're not going to cooperate. She also didn't deny that she didn't exactly get the mid-level maid position fairly. She got the spot because of a recommendation from some big shot higher up. Siana threatened to tell that person that they weren't listening to her, and that would cause them problems. Because when she's asked why the maids aren't listening, she'll say it's because they don't take her seriously, just because she was recommended by that person. In that case, all the lower-level maids are gonna have a bad time. The girls were freaked they were gonna get reamed, so they bowed their heads and greeted Siana. But Jean kept bitching, not believing her backer was anyone from the royal family. Those words were starting to piss Siana off, and she shot a death glare at the red-haired jerk. That look, the kind that chills you to the bone, actually gave Jean the creeps, but she still threatened to rat Siana out the exact same way. And she stormed off, slamming the door, while Siana was just glad she didn't have to keep making excuses or inventing stuff. She'd made a decent impression on the others anyway. Now she could finally get to work and started asking the maids what and how much food had been delivered to the kitchen. The rest of the day went by like that, and no other problems came up. Siana was checking the supplies, where you gotta check not just the quantity, but the expiration dates too. Everyone was stuck here till dawn because of that, and their arms were killing them. There was still a ton of work left, but Siana suggested everyone take a break and grab some grub. The food looked simple, but the maids were so tired it tasted incredible. This was the leftovers after the mid-level maids had their fill. Siana also knew the others would be uncomfortable eating with her around, so she was gonna sit separately. Afterwards, the girls started talking about how Siana was a pretty good worker, and things would fall into place under her. They even hoped they could work with her at the palace after training, and Jean overheard them. Rage filled her again, and she wouldn't be calm until Siana was groveling at her feet. Then she yelled at the others, painting Siana in the worst possible light, and reminding them she'd threatened them not long ago. Jean was shocked to hear the other maids now had a good opinion of their supervisor. Totally done with that kind of talk, she stormed out of the kitchen, cursing Siana under her breath. It pissed her off that these maids already forgot who put food on their damn tables. So, she swore she wouldn't let Siana become a mid-level maid, not on her watch. She even thought about torching the whole place, but realized that'd be going too far. Instead, she decided to smear Siana's name again, and headed off to find Maid. A week had passed since then, and Siana was feeling drained and sleep-deprived. She was stuck working late, and out of nowhere, everyone started nitpicking everything she did. Siana got blamed for sharing leftovers with the maids, like they'd get spoiled or something. But the way she saw it, what was the big deal? But started yelling that the maids would lose all respect for the mid-level staff if they did that. Siana kept arguing that their work efficiency had actually gone up. They were even getting better ratings in the other kitchens now, but those excuses didn't fly. Kept tearing into her, nitpicking every little thing. Siana wasn't really mad. She knew it was just part of the job, and she was ready to handle whatever came her way. The next day, when she got to the warehouse, she saw the maids had arrived way too early. They had a ton of work, but luckily, they'd prepped some stuff the night before. Plus, the new system meant they weren't mixing up which ingredients went to which kitchen anymore. But everyone freaked out when they walked into the kitchen. It was completely trashed. Siana was the most shocked, but she had a pretty good idea who was behind it. Plus, there was a mouse just strolling around, chowing down on the spilled food like it owned the place. All three of them had to bust their asses to get everything back in order, and they were practically dead on their feet. As soon as they were done, came in, totally pissed, wanting to know what the hell was going on and why all the noise. Jan was right behind her, needling them about how badly the place was being run, saying that's why they had a mouse problem. And suggested Sian, who was so confident yesterday, try to explain herself. After all, she'd said there was nothing to worry about, but it looks like things aren't so great, huh? Then she reminded her that this kind of thing happens when you let the lower-level maids off the leash. Jean was just loving it, figuring Sian would start begging not to demote her. But then she suddenly admitted she was to blame for the mess, but said she needed to figure something else out before she took her punishment. A lot of ingredients are ruined, and they're gonna be making breakfast soon, so there could be problems. Plus, mice can spread germs and diseases, and that raises the risk of an epidemic breaking out. So even ingredients we thought were safe, locked away in the cupboards, could be totally ruined. Siana wanted none of that mess, but she asked for a chance to fix things, and promised to make damn sure all the food supplies arrived on time. Meanwhile, Rasheed was still out cold, sawing logs in bed. When Sol walked in and told him someone was here to see him, the Emperor scowled. But when he heard it was Lady Siana, he shot right out of bed, completely confused why she'd show up so early, especially since she's supposed to be in training. He figured she'd had a fight with someone, or maybe someone attacked her, and now Siana was probably standing at his door, all teary-eyed, needing his comfort. Turns out the girl was pretty chill, and first thing she does is apologize for bothering me so early. But Rasheed was still riding that adrenaline rush, so he asked her to spill the beans. What's going on? Siana told him that mice got into the warehouse and ruined all the food. Rasheed wasn't sweating it, of course, but he was still stoked this girl came to him for help. When he invited her inside, Siana asked him for some food supplies from his palace. He thought that was a pretty ballsy request, but he wasn't even mad. He just wondered how she planned to pay him back, because considering the situation, she'd need a lot. Hanging her head, Siana promised to pay it all back, hoping she could save up enough in a few years. Rashid was silent, and the girl, head held high, swore she'd make it right with him. The emperor was a little confused, like, she could have just asked. He would have helped her out anyway. Then, he started asking if they were putting her down at work, and Siana assured him there were no problems with that. Rashid then told her to take whatever she needed, adding that he wouldn't charge her for it. The girl was surprised. He probably wanted something else, but he hadn't named his price yet. He just explained that when he figured it out, he'd find Siana and tell her what he wanted. Soon, Siana arrived at the food warehouse and started ordering everyone to unload everything quickly. The maids got to work, while Jean was confused, not understanding where she got all this stuff. She even started to think that Siana was a witch. Then she started looking at the products, but they immediately started rushing her to help with the work. Not having anything to say against it, the redhead picked up a box that seemed incredibly heavy to her, and by the end of the unloading, all the maids collapsed back into their chairs, completely wiped out. They were stoked they finished on time, and thanked Siana for making it happen. She returned the favor, praising the maids for their hard work. Then the girls got curious and asked where she got all the supplies, and Siana just smirked. Then she confessed a nobleman had helped her out. The maids figured the guy probably had his own warehouse to get the stuff that fast. Now they were sure Siana had a high-class sugar daddy. Even Jean was starting to buy it. It pissed her off that Siana was ahead of her, not just in rank, but also in the imperial family's favor. It's pretty obvious this nobleman has genuine feelings for her. But then Jean got scared Siana might snitch on her, so she decided to zip it. Just then, Siana's voice rang out behind her, wanting to know if the redhead was involved. Jean totally lost it, screaming that she fell asleep early yesterday and wasn't even near the warehouse, which is exactly how she blew her cover, because Siana hadn't even mentioned the warehouse. Plus, first thing this morning, Jean walks in and announces there are rats in the warehouse. So it all clicks. Was chewing out Siana yesterday to distract everyone while Jean pulled her dirty trick. And let's be real, the look on Jean's face this morning when she walked in said it all. Still, she insisted it was just suspicion and swore she had no reason to pull a stunt like that. Siana didn't want to argue too much, just said there'd be an investigation, and they'd quickly find out who had the warehouse key yesterday. Besides, this palace has ears everywhere, and it won't take long to find out who snuck those mice into the warehouse. Jean was green with anxiety, but still kept trying to defend herself. And when the Imperial Palace hears about something like this, they won't waste time figuring it out. They'll just kick everyone out. Jean's betting Siana won't report this, since she's responsible for the other maids. Siana shot the redhead a dark look, then told her she could see right through her. And she reminded her that a big shot's got her back, and he wouldn't let her get dragged into trouble. So Jean's the only one who's gonna pay for this mess, since she could have hurt the Imperial family. In a fit of rage, Jean yelled that she just wanted to mess with Siana, but her words sounded more like an admission of guilt. Realizing that, she got down on her knees and begged Siana not to fire her, finally admitting she was wrong. But Siana told her to spill the whole truth if she really wanted forgiveness. Leaning in a little, Siana asked who else was behind this whole thing, and the redhead confessed that she asked to distract Siana while she let the mice loose. That's when the maid, barged in, screaming that this was total BS and she had nothing to do with it. Still, she begged them to keep it a secret, even promising to apologize to Siana. But Siana just started playing games, saying her patron was super worried about the whole thing, even suspected she was being bullied. Now she was acting like she didn't know what to do, like she couldn't lie to her patron. Knowing the fate they could face, Jean and started sincerely begging her for forgiveness. Then Siana suggested they just pretend nothing happened, so that mysterious guy wouldn't have to worry. Plus, the food she brought would be enough for the whole palace, but it cost a pretty penny. And since Jean and were responsible for the incident, they were gonna have to take the heat for it. And as Siana wished, the guilty maids were handed down a harsh punishment. For conspiring with a low-level maid and for bribery, the servant was demoted to the lowest rank. Jean, that sneaky troublemaker, got demoted to intern. Talk about a total humiliation. And to top it off, they're docking her pay for all the ruined food. As for the rest of the maids who actually did their jobs, they're getting a bonus. Later, Emperor Rashid summoned Siana and praised her amazing talent. But after really looking at her, he noticed she seemed upset about something. Even though she was trying to act all distant, she asked how His Majesty could tell. She got the feeling like he could somehow read people's emotions. Rashid admitted he didn't have any powers like that, but he was good at taking care of those who were vulnerable. Just then, he held out his hand, and a little bird landed on it, and Siana realized he saw her as a pet. Then Rashid promised he'd listen if she ever wanted to talk about what happened. Siana appreciated him helping her out, but she was worried about Jean, who was bawling her eyes out for the first time ever. All she ever wanted was to be a top-tier maid, and now she was so crushed she couldn't even say a word. And now, Siana felt guilty for ruining that maid's dream. Still, she didn't regret punishing her. It was necessary to prevent stuff like that from happening again. Because if someone screws up and doesn't get punished, they'll never learn to regret it. The prince suddenly remembered that her expression at the time was just killer, but he totally dug it. He even leaned in towards Siana and lightly touched her cheek. Rasheed realized that when she needed to be, this girl could be seriously tough. Siana even blushed and quietly thanked him for the compliment, feeling a little awkward and surprised. At the same time, she noticed the weird look Rasheed was giving her at that moment. Then he confessed he liked her personality. Otherwise, she'd have a rough time later on. To kinda steer Rasheed away from the topic, Siana asked what he wanted in exchange for the food. She was hoping he'd just ask for tea like always, but Rasheed suddenly asked her to go on a date with him. After that bombshell, Siana was speechless. She figured he was just messing with her. Rasheed realized he was too blunt and explained he had business outside the palace and wanted to take Siana along. The reason for this was even weirder. The dude explained he was scared to go alone. The girl started trying to talk him out of it, since she didn't have the right permission to leave. But Rasheed told her not to worry about it, assuring her there wouldn't be any problems. Siana knew herself. Nobody would go against the crown prince, but she still couldn't believe they were going on a date. When they arrived, Rasheed was about to get out, but Siana stopped him. Just a reminder, you're the prince, and you shouldn't be wandering around alone without guards. You could run into the assassin, and then we'd have a real problem on our hands. She also pointed out how he was dressed, saying a prince sticks out like a sore thumb. She explained her worry by saying she was just a maid, and it was her job to worry. So Rasheed agreed to disguise himself as a commoner, so he wouldn't need security. They headed to the market, which was overflowing with all kinds of fruits and vegetables. Rasheed admitted it was his first time ever at a market, and he'd pretty much spent his whole childhood locked up in the palace. And when he got older, he was shipped off to the battlefield. It's only been a few months since he and Siana came back to the palace. The girls suddenly realized they actually had something in common, even though she always thought they were total opposites. She was so lost in thought that his last words went right over her head. Rasheed repeated himself, saying he was talking about the festival, which was supposed to be today. They paused briefly by the fountain to take in the view. Then Siana's stomach started growling, and Rasheed, realizing she was hungry, suggested grabbing a bite. The girl was down, but asked if they could hit up that shop with the most refreshing beer in the whole empire. Rasheed was a little surprised Siana liked beer, but hey, she's a grown woman. Besides, according to the maids, it helps you unwind after a long day and forget about your troubles. Of course, Siana had never actually tried beer before, and as soon as she took a sip, she started ranting about being lied to. But the alcohol was doing its thing, and the girl asked for another one. Rasheed was worried she'd get drunk fast, but he knew it was already happening when she confessed she suddenly felt hot. He wasn't drinking, said he had to drive her home later. They hung out a little longer, and the ride back turned out to be way more fun than expected. Siana, hiccuping now and then, insisted she wasn't Rasheed's pet, and wanted to know if he thought she was cute. Then she started squishing his cheeks herself, saying he was just as cute as she was. And then, from out of nowhere, she got this burst of courage. Although, why wouldn't she? Siana leaned in and kissed Rasheed on the nose, because she just couldn't resist how good-looking he was. The guy was totally flustered. For the first time ever, he was speechless. And she, noticing his embarrassed look, confessed that every time he looked at her like that, she got all these feelings. And now she wanted him to feel something like that too. The next morning, Siana woke up to birds chirping outside her window, and the sun was already shining bright in her room. The girl woke up, realized it was already late, and freaked out that she'd overslept. She threw herself together and showed up at the warehouse, apologizing for being late the second she walked in. But she noticed the maids weren't really doing anything, and they explained everyone got the day off. Some other maids were working in place of her crew, brought in on short notice. They were also told to get some rest today, since they're always swamped and need to recharge. Even more shocking to Siana was that the crown prince himself gave the order. The maids used to think he was scary, but now they're convinced he's the best ruler ever. He even sent them food. It was just soup. But for Siana, it was the perfect hangover cure. Realizing Rasheed did all this for her, the girl felt guilty, but started slurping down the broth anyway. It was still warm, and her stomach instantly felt amazing. Siana had barely gotten a few bites in when she heard a familiar voice behind her. Jean walked in and quietly confessed that she was allowed to start classes again tomorrow. Siana didn't know what to think, like she was somehow to blame now. For a moment, Jean just stood there silently, like a kid who'd been caught doing something wrong. And then she admitted she felt really guilty about what she did to Siana, and was genuinely sorry. She also said she didn't want to lie to her anymore, because it was just too hard on her. Siana calmly explained that lies are like an avalanche. One day, they might just crush the liar. Still, she was glad Jean had decided to take responsibility for her actions. The redhead couldn't say anything at that moment except to express her gratitude. Siana mostly just chilled in bed the rest of the day and felt refreshed by evening. Still feeling that hangover, because she definitely overdid it last night. But then it hit her. She touched the crown prince's cheek, and she started mentally kicking her own ass. Felt like she was pulling on a wad of Play-Doh at the time. Sian got so mortified, she was still chewing herself out when the other maids told her to keep it down. I mean, she'd try to explain later like, I got caught up in the vibe and it was my first beer. But deep down, she knew Rasheed let her get away with it because he thought she was cute, which just pissed her off even more. Him treating her like some little pet. So she vowed to apologize for acting like a total idiot. She decided to catch up with him the next day, after her shift ended. Meanwhile, His Highness had been in bed for ages. But sleep just wouldn't come. He couldn't shake the memory of Siana's kiss, and he was dying to see what her face would look like when she showed up. Rasheed caught himself again, looking forward to seeing this girl. Meanwhile, a maid was walking down a warehouse hallway with a candle in her hand. She went into one of the rooms and noticed the food supplies were scattered all over the place again. The next day, Siana showed up to see His Highness and apologized for what happened before. And she clarified that she was apologizing for her inappropriate behavior. The girl vividly remembered pulling his cheek, and she must have done it hard, because she's always kneading dough in the warehouse. It was totally unintentional, but the prince was curious what else she remembered. Turns out, that's where her memories of that night cut off. Rasheed started hinting that there was something even weirder, and Siana got freaked out that she might have punched him. Realizing the maid was taking forever to catch on, His Highness decided to give her a hint. He leaned down and booped her on the nose, just like she'd done to him. Then, he explained that it had totally caught him off guard, but told her not to apologize because he liked it. After that, he took her hand, held it to his cheek, gave her a sweet smile, and gave her those puppy dog eyes again. Siana felt mortified, blushed like crazy, and vowed to never drink again. Later, when she got back to the warehouse, she was told that the supplies were disappearing fast. Princess Grace's requests from the palace were skyrocketing, like she'd hired a ton of new maids. But the number of servants was the same as always, which meant someone was stealing the food. Siana headed over there to sort things out and ran into their head maid, who'd also noticed something weird. Food kept vanishing from their palace too. Even the desserts we make for guests are disappearing without a trace. There's probably a thief among the maids, even though security is tight and it's hard to get past unnoticed. They even started hiding the supplies, but they're still vanishing. The situation was serious, and Siana decided to find the culprit ASAP. That maid suspected one servant who started working here 3 months ago. She's tall as a giant, big as a bear, and strong as an ox. A real monster, basically. That description fit Choo-Choo the most. And Siana couldn't believe her best friend was capable of that. Choo-Choo does eat a lot, but she'd never do something like this. Later they met, and Siana told her friend that she was suspected of stealing the food. Naturally, she blew up instantly, claiming she didn't do anything like that. Then she asked Siana if she knew who the real thief was, but she didn't have any leads yet. Still, she's in charge of food management, so it's her job to figure out who the perp is. She's not gonna make a scene, even if she finds the thief. She just wants them to promise not to do it again. Choo-Choo decided to tell her from the start how she ended up in this palace. She was called in to work for Princess Greitz, who was famous for being a super refined lady. And Choo-Choo was surprised why someone like her was sent there, and they even made her an official maid. The Emperor's third daughter is known for her beauty. He has 7 daughters in total, and the maid's job is to serve the princess and help maintain her flawless beauty. Every morning they apply the best lotion to her face, prepared the day before, and they would comb her long hair for an hour straight. Grace takes a milk bath every evening and gets a lavender oil massage before bed. Choo-Choo's job was to make sure the princess's delicate skin never got a single tan. That meant lugging an umbrella around for her whenever she went outside. The rest of the time, Choo-Choo did other chores, like sweeping the garden paths. One day, she overheard people saying Grace might be sick because she wasn't eating much. Then it came out that food was going missing, even the jerky they made for snacks. They decided not to make a fuss, since the princess wasn't eating much anyway. But they couldn't let a thief get away with it, and Choo-Choo couldn't let anyone hurt her princess. So she decided to find out who was sneaking into the pantry to steal food. That night, in the dim light, she saw the silhouette of a girl. I was about to tear into her, ready to drag her by the hair for stealing from the princess, who barely eats anything as it is. Screaming, Choo-Choo was just about to grab the thief when she turned around. To the maid's surprise, the culprit was Princess Grace herself, who looked terrified she'd been caught eating. She even dropped the bread roll on the floor. Now, talking to Siana, Choo-Choo was hoping this was all some kind of misunderstanding. But the strong woman wasn't sure if she should reveal who she caught red-handed last night. Grace threatened her, saying if she breathed a word of this, she and her entire family would regret it. The princess swore she'd haunt her family for generations, spreading fear and terror. Still, Choo-Choo told her best friend, hoping she could help with this situation. Siana just said that in that case, there's no need to continue the investigation, because if she found the culprit, the princess would totally turn on her, and she'd probably order her head chopped off right then and there. Choo-Choo argued she thought the princess was an angel and didn't believe she was capable of cruelty, but Siana was worried her friend might get accused of stealing food. But Choo-Choo didn't seem to care. She'd rather hear it's a buff maid stealing than the beautiful princess. Besides, Lady Grace had been nice to her ever since that incident. Siana didn't see anything good about that and kept worrying about her friend. She praised Choo-Choo for her kindness, which made her blush a little. And then she got curious about how the princess could fit so much food, because a lot went missing. Plus, how can she stay so slim? Siana thought for a sec, then smiled, remembering there's one trick nobles use. And Choo-Choo was surprised, because she has to train like crazy just to stay in shape. Turns out, it wasn't as great a method as she'd thought. After that, the girls said goodbye, and Siana invited Choo-Choo to hang out whenever she was free. Later, hitting the warehouse, Siana asked if they'd caught the crook. They immediately told her the princess's maids figured out who was eyeing the food. Just like Siana feared, all fingers pointed at Choo-Choo, since she was the new girl in the palace. Without a word, the girl bolted straight out of the kitchen. She couldn't believe her best friend, the kindest person ever, was accused of stealing. Siana headed to the princess's palace, but they told her there was no reason to let her in, since they'd caught the thief. She still started arguing that Choo-Choo wasn't guilty, but another maid found out Siana trained with Choo-Choo, though she was willing to call it a coincidence. If Siana knew everyone was so hostile towards her friend, she wouldn't have wrapped up the investigation so fast. Still, she demanded proof that Choo-Choo was actually responsible for what happened. Of course, there wasn't any proof. Everyone was just talking about her, and now she's locked in her room. That pissed Siana off, since they locked up a maid based on nothing but their suspicions. But the princess's maid just threatened to report it to the head inspector, and then Siana could be accused of being an accomplice too. The thing is, the inspector didn't deal with stuff like this, so it was convenient to just blame one maid and be done with it. All the maids in the princess's palace disliked Choo-Choo, and it was in their interest to point the finger at her. Siana wasn't about to abandon her friend, so she caught up to the maid and blocked her path. Then she demanded, real angrily, to see the princess. She got shut down, told Lady Grace doesn't talk to mid-level maids. Figuring she wasn't getting in, Siana turned around and left, but only because she's got other ways to play this. Later, Princess Grace was at her table, getting served her usual tiny portion of food. She also got a note from that maid, Siana. After a while, they met up in the garden, and the maid gave her a polite hello. The princess cut right to it, asking if Siana knew who the real culprit was. Then she demanded she spill everything she knew about the case. When Siana pointed the finger at the princess, she realized the maid just wanted to get her friend off the hook. Besides, the maid doesn't have any actual proof, and the only one who knows the truth is locked up tight and won't say a word without permission. Siana had a theory. She asked around about rumors and figured out that Lady Grace usually eats next to nothing. A normal person would have passed out from eating that little a long time ago. So, she started suspecting the princess was getting food somewhere else. Grace started arguing, saying she's a princess and couldn't possibly be eating on the side, especially so much. Otherwise, she'd be as fat as a pig by now. But Siana knew that nobles go to extremes to keep their figures, and one of the tricks is to pig out first, then force yourself to throw up. That way, you never gain weight no matter how much you eat, but it puts a huge strain on your body. All that puking makes it a pain to swallow, and it'll drain you mentally. Then, you start throwing up without even trying, just because you're scared of gaining weight. Trust me, all this can really mess you up. The princess was curious how a simple servant knew all this, but Siana had been through it herself, and claimed she knew a way to escape this hell. Besides, Your Highness doesn't need to expose the culprit, but she does have to free Choo-Choo. And if Lady Grace agrees to this, Siana promised to help her. Choo-Choo was soon released and, as ordered, headed to the princess's study. But when she walked in, she was genuinely surprised. She wasn't expecting to see Siana there, not just present, but sitting right next to the princess. Lady Grace said she knew they were friends, and that the maid came with her service. First, the friends hugged, and Choo-Choo even bragged that she finally got some decent rest, which was good enough for her, because more rest, and she'd start losing muscle. Grace remembered her maids reporting that they'd ID'd the culprit. She was even surprised, because she already knew the truth. Still, she decided to frame Choo-Choo, hoping to make it up to her with money later. But right now, she had a sharp lump stuck in her throat. Just then, Choo-Choo started thanking the princess for letting her out. Lady Grace told her not to thank her, admitting she didn't want to lock her up. Then she guiltily scolded herself for secretly swiping food from the warehouse. The maids were scratching their heads. The grub belongs to royalty anyway, so she wasn't stealing, just taking what's hers. The princess knew every single word the maid said was the honest truth, and she remembered Choo-Choo telling her she could have just asked for food, instead of sneaking around at night like some common thief, and Grace was torn about what to do next. Not wanting to get busted, she threatened the maid to keep her mouth shut, because if she didn't, she and her whole damn family would regret it. That same night, Choo-Choo brought the princess a sausage roll, saying it tastes way better this way. Grace was caught off guard, but the maid wasn't looking at her with pity or forcing a fake smile. It hit her that Choo-Choo wasn't looking down on her, and after trying the sausage roll, she agreed it was actually bomb. This maid respected the princess and kept her secret, even when she got nailed for stealing. And get this, Her Highness straight up apologized to her, admitted she was a coward, and totally shouldn't have treated her like that. Both maids were completely stunned, never expecting the princess to act like that. Later, Choo-Choo got the green light to pour tea for the lady, and she was so nervous. She was like a bear terrified of spilling a single drop of honey. But the princess loved the tea she made, said it tasted kinda like honey. Grace even took 2 sips, then suddenly remembered she'd get fat from it. Siana, who was still nearby, saw the princess freak out and told her 2 sips wouldn't do anything. Then she asked Her Highness to spill the tea on when all this started. And the princess confessed that her mom mostly cared about her older brother, since he was closer to the throne, so Grace could basically live however she wanted. She's the daughter of Empress Layla III, and since she was a kid, she's loved to chow down. Being born a princess, she got to eat all kinds of amazing, delicious food. It made her happy, and mostly, she just thought about what she'd be eating next. But pretty soon, Her Highness had packed on the pounds and looked like a potato in a dress. People whispered that no one would ever marry her looking like that. Then one day, when Grace was a bit older, her mom told her to stop eating so much because she was getting engaged soon. Her partner was supposed to be Isaac von Hastings, the 3rd son of Count Hastings. The princess had actually seen this young dude before. He was a handsome, fit guy, and he caught her stuffing her face. Her Highness fell head over heels for him the second she saw him. And on top of that, he was a total gentleman. He even helped her wipe crumbs off her mouth. When Grace found out she was engaged to him, she was so stoked she was a princess and got assigned such a catch. But her mom told her to keep it classy and not act like a moron when Isaac came over. The day the Earl's son showed up, he looked even hotter, like he'd grown into a total Adonis. Their meeting started off awesome, and Grace was on cloud 9 when he kissed her hand. He even confessed he had really warm feelings for her, which the princess bought without question. Back then, it seemed like true love. Even the maids were saying no one else ever gave the princess a second look. But this guy fell right away. Grace's face was seriously gorgeous, so she didn't doubt his feelings were real. And before they knew it, the date for their engagement was set. In the hall, she spotted a bunch of girls who were totally crushing on Isaac. One of them was a knockout, but she made sure to compliment the princess when she walked in. Then, all the other young ladies piled on, gushing about how great Grace looked. Right in the middle of the praise fest, Isaac himself showed up, announcing he just had to greet Her Highness. Right in front of everyone, he dropped to one knee and kissed her hand. Then he asked how the princess was doing, and she asked about his stuff too. Isaac then raved about the chocolate cake she'd sent, saying it just melted in his mouth. The princess actually blushed a little, admitting she'd been nervous. Just then, that gorgeous girl, Julia, strolled over, remarking how close those two seemed. Grace couldn't stop thinking that this handsome dude was about to become her fiancé. She whispered to her friends that they'd been engaged for ages. They looked like a perfect couple from the outside, even though the princess was a bit on the hefty side. But then Grace noticed that the young ladies had a really weird reaction to her confession. A little later, they were officially announced as engaged, and the guests offered their congratulations. Then Lady Layla stepped up, thanked everyone for their kind words, and started reading her speech. Just then, Grace glanced at her fiancé and noticed he was looking at her too, smiling. It made her happy, and then she went back to grab another bite to eat. But then she realized Isaac had totally vanished. The princess went looking for him all over the palace, but couldn't find him for the longest time. Stepping out into the garden, I saw his broad shoulders and finally felt like I'd found what I was looking for. But as Grace got closer, she saw something awful. Isaac was standing there in the garden with Julia. From the tone of their conversation, it was clear this wasn't just a friendly chat. The princess overheard Isaac saying he'd promised Julia he'd propose to her when she grew up. The Earl himself explained that those were just some careless words tossed out by a 10-year-old kid. But now things were different. He was 17, and Julia was 14, and they weren't kids anymore. Then Isaac asked her to keep her composure and pretend they didn't know each other. The Earl was playing it safe, knowing this could cause a real scandal. Meanwhile, Grace was praying that Isaac wouldn't break off their engagement for that skinny beauty, who was apologizing for her tone, saying she was just stunned by the news of his engagement. Then she saw them start to say their goodbyes, and her fiancé explained why he hadn't told her everything sooner. Before leaving, Julia asked Isaac if he even wanted to marry Lady Grace. The girl humbly said she understood everything, but reminded him that the princess was a little chubby, and that there were a lot of rumors going around about her among the other girls. The bride was fuming at this point, guessing what was coming next. Supposedly, in her tight pink dress, and with her pale skin, Grace looked more like a pork sausage. Grace wanted to jump out of hiding and tear the mouth off the jerk who was talking about her like that. She was barely holding back when Isaac suddenly said he already knew all these rumors. Plus, he'd never liked fat girls, and Julia didn't understand why he wanted this marriage so badly. Grace wanted to scream that she knew exactly how her fiancé really felt. He explained that the marriage was super beneficial for his family, and he had no choice but to suck it up. Now the princess knew all those compliments about her beauty were total BS, and bummed out, she just bailed. Her dress brushed against some bushes, and Isaac and Julia realized someone was nearby. The princess went back to her place totally crushed. She didn't even feel like taking out that hottie anymore. She just wanted to crawl into a hole and cry forever. Her face was already a complete mess of tears when she got to the mirror and collapsed in front of it. But from that day on, she started dieting, and 3 months later, Isaac turned 17. The third empress came to congratulate him, but Grace was nowhere to be seen. Some of the guests started worrying that she wouldn't show, but the Earl assured them that according to Layla's promise, she'd be there soon. The truth was, they hadn't seen each other since the engagement party, and had only communicated through letters. The princess was blaming it on feeling under the weather, and now her friends were worried she'd miss her fiancé's birthday. Someone joked she couldn't handle the makeup, which wouldn't make her look like Julia anyway, but the girls knew the truth. Isaac wasn't interested in that loud, fat girl with the empty stare. Just then, the young ladies noticed a strange look on the young count's face. The third empress turned to look as well, and the girls wondered who they were staring at. That's when they heard a familiar voice, belonging to someone they weren't expecting. Princess Grace stood before them, and she looked completely different. Her chubby cheeks were gone, she had a waist, and now she was here to greet her fiancé. All the ladies were shocked, but especially Isaac. Grace was saying that since it's his birthday today, she wanted to go all out. Now his feelings have totally flipped. The young earl sincerely took her hand, and with genuine respect, he knelt and kissed her hand. Grace finally saw his face when he was truly amazed, but she had to cut portions and take lots of walks to get this look. The princess hoped she'd finally be truly happy now. But honestly, she just felt relief when she threw everything back up. And the more she ate, the more she threw up. And Grace realized this was the answer. After hearing her, the maids realized the princess wasn't eating properly at all, and she barely touched her food at the table, so she wouldn't puke in front of everyone. While others didn't think her not eating was weird, they actually thought she was pretty elegant. For a while, the princess held it together. But a few months ago, things went sideways. At night, her mind would cloud over, and she'd stuff her face with whatever she could find, then puke it all up back in her room. That was the only way she could keep going. And over time, the amount of food just kept increasing, because Grace was constantly starving. But she'd lose her mind, like an animal, when she crammed food in her mouth. And then she'd throw it all up every time to avoid gaining weight. And now, the princess was asking these maids to help her. Suddenly, giving in to her emotions, Choo-Choo rushed forward to hug her highness. She understood that this lady had been through a lot, and that she was going through some really tough times. And Siana, in a pretty calm voice, thanked the princess for telling them the truth. She promised she'd kick this bad habit real soon. First off, to start eating right, Grace needed to ditch the negative vibes she had about food. Siana told her about Tibetan monks who don't eat animals or modified grains. They only eat plants grown in their natural environment. The princess could eat carrots, cabbage, stuff like that, and not gain any weight. But Grace pointed out that elephants only eat veggies too, and they're huge. Siana had to explain that elephants are just naturally like that. They're big, but they don't get all flabby or pack on the pounds. Then, the girl recommended some veggie dishes, even though she knew it'd be tough on the princess. After all, she was deep into her bad habit, but she swore she'd give it her best shot. So we gotta figure out how to keep her from puking. And Siana said exercise after eating might help. This ain't no regular job, like Grace thought at first. Exercise is just how knights train, you know? And honestly, any movement counts as exercise, even just a walk around the block. Thing is, the princess was scared of getting a tan and ruining her pale skin. Siana realized her highness wanted to keep that delicate, elegant princess look. But then Choo-Choo suggested working out indoors, and even showed off her own muscles as an example. That freaked Grace out, because she didn't want to end up looking like a bear. Siana calmed her down, explaining that Choo-Choo wouldn't push her too hard, just make sure she moved around more. She also asked if Grace had any problems with her teeth or a sore throat when swallowing, because if she keeps making herself throw up, she'll just wreck her body, and it'll only get worse from there. Her teeth will start falling out, one after another. Her throat will get raw, and she won't be able to eat at all. Then it's game over, and Her Highness will just kick the bucket. That argument scared Lady Grace big time. She definitely didn't want to die. After she promised to train with Choo-Choo, the girl dragged some dumbbells into the room and started showing her how to lift and lower this workout gear to build up muscle. Choo-Choo brought the princess the lightest dumbbells, but still doubted she could even lift them. But she was super surprised when Her Highness smoothly copied the exercise she'd been shown. Still, Choo-Choo was worried, knowing the princess had a fragile skeleton, the kind only a few people have. Then she added that regular exercise would help her build some muscle. Grace panicked and dropped the dumbbell, almost twisting her wrist. But she reminded me she wants to eat right, but is totally against turning into a she-bear like the maid. Then, Choo-Choo brought her an omelet with veggies, like Siana recommended. And Her Highness didn't just scarf that thing down, she straight up licked the plate clean. She thought it was all super tasty, and she felt satisfied. But her face immediately twisted in horror, and she felt like puking before she started getting fat. Still, she remembered Siana's advice and started to hold back. After a while, Siana learned that the princess was doing well and even upped her training sessions. Now she was happy for Grace. Realizing she had worried for nothing, Siana had her own physical labor. Now she had to move sacks. She'd hoped becoming a maid would make her stronger, but realized her strength has its limits too. Another sack, and she almost ate it, tripped right up. Then Rasheed caught her. He popped up out of nowhere, like a jack-in-the-box, but said he was just checking on the warehouse. Then he admitted he was messing with her, and he really wanted to see Siana. Ever since their last run-in, when he said she was playing him like a fiddle and she kissed him, she bolted. He thought it was flirting, but she just wasn't tracking his train of thought. And while she was blushing again, Rasheed just thought she was freaking adorable. His Highness was suddenly dying to pull her close and just hold her. But seeing her practically having a meltdown, he figured it wasn't gonna happen, and not here anyway. Noticing Siana still had work to do, Rasheed offered to help, and she took him up on it. Together, they finished up pretty quick, and she thanked him for the assist. And then it hit her again. How handsome he was, and still not corrupted by power. Plus, he was turning out to be super caring, which you wouldn't guess at first glance. She was so lost in thought, she poked his muscles without even realizing it. And Rasheed was like, "What are you doing?" Realizing what she'd done, Siana freaked out and started apologizing like crazy. But His Highness totally got that she liked his physique and rolled up his sleeve to flex for her. And for a few moments, Siana just stared at his biceps, completely hypnotized, like she was jealous. If she had even half that muscle, her job would be way easier. That's when the prince pictured her with ripped muscles, even though he'd still think she was cute that way. But he mostly liked that she was so petite, easy to hold in his arms. That made Siana blush and turn away, and Rasheed just went back to daydreaming. He wanted her closer, and he was sure it would happen, just didn't know when. Soon, Sian heard that Princess Grace's condition was even better. When the maid checked on Her Highness, she saw with her own eyes that she looked even more beautiful. Her complexion had improved, her hair was shiny, and her eyes were full of life. But more importantly, the princess was much calmer, and she was throwing up less often. Grace admitted that she even liked exercising, especially since it didn't make her gain weight. And Choo-Choo was thrilled that Her Highness was doing so well with the exercises. Xian was just glad that the princess was doing well, and that she was full of energy. And she wasn't even embarrassed when Choo-Choo compared her to world-class athletes. And to show what results she'd achieved, she lifted a table, demonstrating her physical strength. Just then, they heard someone coming in, and Choo-Choo barely managed to yank the table away from the princess before anyone saw it. The maid who walked in announced that Isaac was there to see Her Highness. Then, he himself walked in. His face was dead serious, and he carried himself with complete confidence. Grace thanked Choo-Choo for her work and asked her to leave them alone. She didn't waste any time, only promising to make tea for Her Highness and her guest. Isaac commented that the princess seemed to have a good relationship with her maid, but he told her not to forget her position and to be careful not to be swayed by others. He also expressed his concerns, mentioning that Her Highness didn't look quite like herself. After all, she's his fiancée, and he didn't expect her to greet him looking so disheveled. A princess should always look perfect, though Grace didn't see anything wrong with how she looked. They're engaged, plus she told him he can come over whenever he wants. Isaac, realizing he embarrassed Her Highness, explained he came because he missed her. Also, he heard from Empress Layla that Grace hadn't left her room in ages, and he got worried. But she couldn't tell him she was just trying to kick her bad habits. Still, she was happy her fiancé was worried about her and assured him she was totally fine. Isaac also heard the princess was eating more, so she didn't look so run down. But her baggy, rumpled dress told him she'd been lying in bed all day. The guy was worried she'd go back to her old self, and Grace shuddered at the thought. To cover, she claimed she was only eating vegetables and working out. That's how she's controlling her weight and overall feeling way better. Isaac was surprised to hear his fiancée was working out, since that's usually night stuff. He even tried to talk her out of it, saying he really liked the way she looked now. He wanted her to be delicate and elegant, and suggested she eat less to keep the weight off. Later, Choo-Choo brought the princess a salad dinner, but made it filling enough to actually satisfy her. But Grace wouldn't even let her in, declaring she wasn't gonna eat it. She even yelled at the maid when she begged her to at least try a bite. Her Highness decided to keep on living the same old way, because she thought it was the only way to be loved. She didn't even care that this puking habit could actually kill her. It was better than being disgusting in Isaac's eyes, as far as she was concerned. Realizing she couldn't handle it alone, Choo-Choo called Siana for help, who was asking for permission to come in. But now the princess wasn't even responding, and the maids were starting to freak out, thinking she might have passed out. So Siana just opened the door and went in to see what was going on. Grace was kneeling on the floor, looking like a thundercloud, chanting that she wasn't gonna eat. And even if she did eat something, because she was starving, she'd just puke it right back up. Even then, she was scared that something might still stay in her stomach. Seeing her Highness like that, Choo-Choo got super scared for her and rushed over, covering her with a blanket. She begged her to stop, but the princess just got angrier and shoved the maid away. Her Highness was terrified of getting chubby again, like she used to be. And if that happened, Isaac would break off their engagement and marry that little twerp, Julia. If Grace got fat, even the maids would hate her again and start spreading rumors about her. The princess thinks she's the prettiest in the palace, but she'll be useless if she gets fat. Then she just started bawling, and the maids waited a few minutes, knowing the tears would bring some relief. And then Siana pitched another idea and explained it, that the only person Her Highness should worry about is herself, and she shouldn't think about those who don't even love her. For a second, Her Highness seemed interested in the suggestion, but then sadness took over again, and the tears flowed even harder. To comfort the poor thing, the maids hugged her, because hugs usually help ease suffering. Later, when Grace calmed down a bit, Siana told her not to worry, and nobody would find out about today. At that moment, Siana seemed like a high-ranking maid who'd served the royal family for a long time. The princess even figured Siana had faced a similar problem, because she understood her so well. Then she asked me to tell my story. Grace was curious how Siana managed to get out of it, and in a slightly sad voice, she said that she had a similar story, and that she desperately wanted love. But when she stopped trying to beat her eating disorder, everyone started hating her and ditched her. Even her parents doubted they could marry her off looking like that. And then she realized it was a poison eating her from the inside, and the little doll she used to be vanished. Siana explained that it's not worth torturing yourself just to please others. A princess can live the way she wants, especially since she has so much power, because Grace is the daughter of the Empress and Emperor of this country. She can eat whatever she wants and wear whatever dresses she likes, and anyone who doesn't like it can just shove it. And if Grace has found someone she cares about, she should try to get closer to him. It doesn't have to be Isaac, right? There's no law saying you have to marry him. Siana made saying crazy crap like that sound so damn easy, but it helped calm Her Highness down, and then Siana was about to bounce. That's when Choo-Choo, quick on her feet, shoved a dish she'd made right under the princess's nose. She apologized like, "Oh, bad timing," and acted like she was gonna split, leaving Her Highness alone with the food. Choo-Choo just added that if the lady wasn't hungry, she'd happily eat it all herself. Or if not, she could show her another easy exercise to drop the weight fast. And that's when Grace realized that instead of obsessing over losing weight, she wanted to get stronger. The next morning, the maids were running around the palace like chickens with their heads cut off. They were cooking tons of food for Princess Grace, and they were shocked at how much she could put away. Once she'd finally satisfied her appetite, she kicked her feet up on the table, crossed them. Stretching out, she was just stoked to finally eat in peace, as much as she damn well pleased. All that was left was to pick the leftovers out of her teeth with a toothpick, which just made people think she was even weirder. After chilling for 5 minutes, Grace ordered the head maid to bring her dessert. The maid dared to suggest the lady would get fat again, but the princess twisted her words around, so she ended up being the one in the wrong. The maid swore she only wanted Her Highness's happiness, and obediently went to fetch the dessert. Choo-Choo decided to stir the pot, hinting that even a dog gets left alone while eating. But this one dared to contradict the princess. After Grace had her fill of the sweet stuff, it was time to get to work. She could lift a seriously heavy weight, and her muscles had gotten so big, even she loved it. Just then, Isaac burst in, screaming hysterically that the princess was going to ruin her figure. Grace then bragged that she was getting stronger thanks to a training device Choo-Choo made for her, and she was proud she liked it. Plus, she hated wearing makeup anyway. A freaked-out Isaac started begging her to reconsider. He even got down on one knee, explaining that it was wrong. But this time, the princess just got pissed, and she started chewing him out for daring to scold the daughter of the most respected people in the country, the rulers of the empire. That kind of thing usually gets you punished, and Isaac realized he'd gone too far, but he just stayed kneeling there, watching Grace's sweet face fill with rage. She yanked her hand away from him in disgust because he dared to make fun of her. Now the guy realized he'd screwed up and started apologizing. He was probably afraid his bride wouldn't be the most beautiful flower in the empire, but no matter how he tried to weasel his way out, Her Highness wasn't buying a single word. She slapped him so hard, even Choo-Choo got spooked. The princess then sneered, saying the young earl had such dainty little arms, and now she knew why. He might be a nobleman who loves the cushy life, but you can't call him a strong man with those noodle arms. Lady Grace finished by telling him to hit the gym for once. Later, His Highness Rasheed showed up at Siana's workplace again. She asked what was up this time, and it turned out he just wanted a drink. Before that, he dropped by, because he was craving fruit. Then he came to check out the menu. And another time, he showed up to grab some pet food. Siana was worried that Rasheed was going to cause trouble for her, maybe even a scandal. That's when her relatively chill life as a maid bites the dust. Like he was reading her mind, Rasheed swore that as a prince of this empire, he could smooth over any bumps in the road. Seriously, he's been popping into Siana's storage room so much, and the other maids haven't dared to say a peep. Feeling a bit tamer, the girl asked what kind of drink the prince would like. Rasheed just sneezed in response, and Siana realized his throat was probably just dry. But then she noticed he was a little flushed, and after feeling his forehead, she figured out His Highness had caught a cold. She started scolding him, telling him not to screw around and to get his butt back to bed and get some rest. Rasheed couldn't rest. He'd lived on the battlefield since he was 13, and he'd been wounded, even broken bones before. There was even a time he got hit with a poisoned arrow, messed up his insides, and almost died. Compared to that, he didn't see anything scary about a cold, saying it was just like a leaf brushed past him. Siana was against it though, saying the leaf could be poisoned and put him in danger, even if everything seemed fine. She urged him to be careful so complications wouldn't arise. After that, Siana suggested taking him to the palace and starting treatment. Later, the girl helped His Highness into bed, and then she got ready to leave. But then Rasheed grabbed her apron and said his throat was getting tighter and his temperature was rising. The girl didn't get why he wouldn't ask the other servants for help, but she couldn't leave him like that either. Then she made him milk with honey and ginger. After just 1 cup, His Highness should feel a lot better. Rasheed took a sip, then complimented the maid, saying that everything she made was delicious. Siana was a little bewildered, not understanding how someone who'd spent so much time on the battlefield could say something like that. Then she straight up told him she thought he was a weird dude. His Highness just twisted her words around like she was into strange guys, which totally flustered her, and she started scrambling for something to say. Rasheed just took it as a win, like he was her type, according to her own words. Siana thought it was total nonsense, like he was delirious from the fever. She went to tuck him in tighter, and that's when he said he really liked her taking care of him. She didn't want to hang around him for long, and asked him to give the job to someone else. Back at her post, Siana thanked the maids for their hard work. Today was her last day at this gig. The maids were happy with her too, and as a thank you, they had a little gift for her. They made her a necklace of acorns and nuts, so now she can grab a snack while she works. Then Siana spotted Jean, who was quiet as a mouse all of a sudden. She called her over to say goodbye too, but just for now, since they'd see each other soon. The 3 maids saw Siana off, heads bowed with respect and obedience, and once she stepped across the threshold, she could proudly say she was now a mid-level maid. Of course, Siana went right back to the Ruby Palace, missing Eris, and noticed she looked great. Guess the Empress had been taking good care of her this whole time. She got curious how the little one managed the Empress, and asked her to spill all the details. The little princess tilted her head, a little embarrassed, saying that Grandma must like her, because even when she was clanging dishes and smacking her lips while eating, the Empress wasn't even giving her notes, just watching her and tossing out compliments now and then. Even when Eris threw tantrums, the Empress never once lost her cool. The kid figured her grandma was just missing her own granddaughter a lot, so she was being extra nice. Goldria even gave her these old dresses, which the little one thought were totally tasteless. The twin maids were getting all worked up about how much the little princess had been through. They even started sniffling when they heard she'd missed them a ton. Then the twins started quietly bickering about who'd get to take care of Her Highness first. That just made the princess think they were even weirder, even though they'd gotten promoted. After a while, a royal carriage pulled up to the Ruby Palace. When little Heiress saw who climbed out, she started complaining, not wanting to see those guests. That was Princess Grace, and she wasn't here to see Heiress. But Siana, plus, she got a whole new hairstyle. She wanted to show it off to the maid and, just chat about old times. Thing is, Heiress hated it when other people hung out with her maids, so she demanded Grace leave. Even though her face was twisted up with anger, Grace still thought she was cute. Just then, Siana showed up and, seeing Her Highness, asked what brought her here. But then she spotted Choo-Choo sniffling behind the princess and got a little worried. Turns out, the powerhouse just really missed Siana and even apologized to Horus for the surprise visit. The little princess couldn't believe that's the only reason the maid came all the way here with Her Highness. At that, Choo-Choo decided to take her leave, so she wouldn't interrupt the sisters' chat. Siana agreed that it wasn't cool to just barge in like that, especially to ruin the master's mood with tears. She was just putting on a show, pretending to give her friend a serious dressing down. It worked, and Grace jumped in, saying she was super happy to see her sister, which is why she came to visit. Then the princesses agreed to have some tea, after which each one hoped they could bail as soon as possible. The emperor's daughters settled in a gazebo where the sun wasn't blazing, even though Grace wasn't as scared of getting a tan anymore. Meanwhile, Choo-Choo was asking Siana why the princesses were suddenly acting so nice. Already drinking tea, Grace knew she had to start the conversation and asked if Aris already had a fiancé. She explained she wasn't trying to give any advice and admitted she was a little jealous of the kid, but she asked her to postpone the engagement as much as possible, or even better, not do it at all. Because as she gets older, she'll see her partner in a totally different light, not the way it was in the beginning. The girl realized something must have happened with Grace's fiancé, and Grace confessed that she felt uneasy around him. A princess is supposed to be composed, keep up appearances, and speak in a gentle voice, right? No matter what, she has to stay elegant and chill, and absolutely no cussing. Then, like they'd planned it, both princesses announced that if a guy's making demands, the better follow them too. Choo-Choo was a little surprised to see the sisters getting along so well. While the imperial daughters were chatting, another guest showed up. Empress Angela came with her son, but seeing Eris was busy, she decided to come back later. Good Eyes, though, noticed the boy was giving her a weird look. They explained he wanted to draw her, and the princess agreed. Iris was also itching to watch her little brother work, and the boy's mom noticed things were starting to repeat themselves. Something similar happened last time too. Meanwhile, Prince Rasheed got a letter from his folks saying they're gonna stay at the spa longer, which meant His Highness was stuck organizing the rose banquet all by himself, and it was coming up fast. It's this yearly thing, and the big rule is everyone's gotta show up with a date. And that rule definitely applied to the guy running the whole show. That's when Sol freaked out, realizing His Highness still didn't have a fiancée. But he suggested Rasheed take this chance to find a lady who could eventually become his wife. This girl also needed to understand the prince's personality, but he wasn't feeling it at all. For some reason, he just wasn't into girls, which started all sorts of scandalous rumors about him. The truth was, Rasheed was only interested in animals. He even thought about bringing one as his date to the banquet. And he thought that was kinda cute. The guard was at his wit's end, terrified His Highness would die an old bachelor. But then he remembered there was one woman in the kingdom who really caught the prince's eye. So, he boldly suggested Lady Siana as a partner for the rose banquet. Rasheed was all for it, but he seriously doubted she'd agree. The guard decided to handle that himself and headed to Siana's place with gifts. But just like His Highness suspected, the maid turned him down flat. She explained it wasn't the presents. It was her position that was the problem. Even for one day, a regular maid would get slammed for even standing next to His Highness. Nasty rumors would start, and Siana's peaceful life would be over. And she was right. Sul even started kicking himself for not thinking about it. He just wanted her by the prince's side, not those other fake ladies. Sure, Rasheed's got chicks throwing themselves at him, but he's not interested. His Highness only wants to see Siana, the maid. But now he's got to hit that banquet solo, 'cause she turned him down. Siana knew Rasheed loved her like a little pet, but that's no reason to say yes. She told Sol she was sorry when he suddenly announced he'd have to be the prince's date. Of course, there'll be a ton of nasty rumors after that, but Sol's used to it, and his mom will be crying her eyes out, but the guard's got no choice. Siana knew exactly how this could play out and agreed to go with His Highness. But she's got one major condition. Sol cut her off, promising she could have anything, even 10 times more than she asked for. But she just wanted to keep her peaceful life as a maid, so she asked him not to reveal her identity. That might be a little tricky, seeing as how a lot of people in the palace already know her face. Siana told the guard not to sweat it. She'd take care of her appearance herself. For Seoul, the main thing was setting up a fake identity for her. After a while, Siana headed to the Imperial Palace. And the second Rasil saw her, he was practically jumping for joy, like a little kid. Plus, he was super stoked she'd accepted the offer. But she didn't get why he hadn't asked her himself. It's like his ego was too fragile to have a noble prince asking a maid for a favor. Rashid explained that a request from him might seem like an order, so he was worried. He finally realized sending someone else would have been a total cop-out. Then Rashid dropped to one knee and kissed Siana's hand, which totally stunned her. Pressing his cheek against her hand, the prince thanked her for agreeing to his tough request. Siana, kinda charmed by his face at that moment, asked him to fill her in on the details of the banquet. It's an event celebrating the goddess of roses and love, so having a partner is a must. Plus, the organizer has to do the opening dance, no exceptions. His Highness noticed Siana was listening way too seriously and figured she didn't believe in love. The girl thought love was super rare, like a miracle, especially in royal families. So yeah, this whole kind of event is a little shocking to her. She thought they just had to make an appearance at the start, but the prince told her not to worry or stress about it. But then Siana just announced she was gonna go all out since she agreed to come. She even asked Rashid to practice dancing with her right then and there. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a carriage carrying other banquet attendees was heading down a forest road. This red-haired dude, Kiran, was holding a locket with Siana's photo inside, and his sister, Carolina, was telling him to ditch that thing and forget about the girl. Everyone figured Princess Siana died the day the kingdom of Aslan fell, but Kiran wasn't buying it. They never found her body, so she's definitely alive, just somewhere else. The redhead woman knew the kid had a serious thing for that princess, but the reason they came here was to strengthen ties with the imperial family, and she wasn't gonna stand by if Kiran's love life started messing things up. The guy told his mom not to worry, swearing he hadn't lost it enough to do anything stupid. Calming down, the woman promised to help him out once she finished her own chores. Kiran himself never stopped believing he'd find Siana, no matter what. And when he did find her, he'd never let go of her hand again. Meanwhile, Rashid noticed the maid was dancing unbelievably well, really feeling the beat. The girl mentioned she used to be a princess, but never thought that skill would come in handy. As for the prince, it seemed like he was dancing for the first time. His Highness really hadn't learned to dance, or rather, he hadn't had time for that kind of stuff. Back then, there was a war going on, and Rashid didn't have the chance. Siana couldn't even believe that the most powerful heir to the imperial throne, dude picked a seriously tough road to become prince. She couldn't figure out why His Highness was even going through all this. But hey, it wasn't the only weird thing. Then, all of a sudden, Siana, after apologizing for being blunt, straight up asked Rashid why he still didn't have a fiancé. Just like the rumors said, the prince declared he wasn't into girls, but he saw something special in Siana. That kinda shocked the maid, and Rashid gently touched her face, fixing a strand of her hair. Siana's face reminded him of a white bun with 3 round beans. It made her look super cute. Now she was even regretting asking that kind of question in the first place, and she just asked to keep practicing the dance, noting that Rashid was a quick learner. Later, Siana told Aris that she'd be her brother's partner at the banquet, and hoped she'd take it okay. But the princess was obviously jealous of the maid, who apparently has a thing for someone else in the royal family, and she declared she wasn't just gonna sit back and watch. To that end, the princess planned to make sure Siana reeked of her scent from a mile away. So, on Her Highness's orders, the twins grabbed the maid by the arms and dragged her to the bathroom, where they rubbed her down with the same oils Princess Aris uses. The little princess also didn't want her maid looking like a slob at the banquet. She wanted Siana to be the most beautiful one there. Actually, Siana was planning on dressing herself. They even gave her money for it. And now she had to repay His Highness for his generosity and really put in the effort. Siana didn't fight the prep, but she did ask them to get lavender oil ready for her next bath. She also requested a different conditioner for her hair, so it wouldn't get so tangled. Siana seemed a little sus to the princess because of that. But that's exactly why she liked her, so Aris gave the maid everything she asked for. The next time Siana met the prince, he couldn't stop staring at her. She even wondered if she had something on her face. But Rashid just noticed something was different about her. He was actually making progress with his dancing too, which kind of surprised him. But he knew he'd learned to dance well thanks to Siana, and he was grateful for it. She caught that weird look on his face again, and he was way too close. Then she confessed that she couldn't make it to rehearsal tomorrow, because she had to pick out a dress and jewelry for the banquet. And since she's trying to keep her identity secret, she needs to be totally prepared. Plus, Rashid can't go dress shopping with her, because it'll be obvious she's his partner. No way you can hide Rashid's face like last time, because this ain't no peasant festival. We could run into a whole crowd of noble ladies out shopping for the banquet. Completely hiding his identity is going to be impossible anyway, and Siana didn't even want to pick out a dress with him. After explaining all that, the maid was about to head out, but the prince stopped her, and as soon as she turned around, he shoved a candy in her mouth. It was a chocolate candy with raspberry filling, and she thought it tasted incredible. Still, she asked him to be a little more polite and give them to her wrapped next time. Rasheed just gave her a sweet smile, but promised to grant her request. Watching her walk away, the prince noticed how small she was. But she had these quick, cute little steps. Standing there like that, the maid reminded Rasheed of a chipmunk. This bloodthirsty prince sure knows how to lay on the charm when he talks to people. But it's all an act. Rasheed's ice cold. There's not a human bone in his body. The prince could chop off some random dude's head without a second thought. But around this short, kinda cute maid, His Highness actually seems like a normal dude. Sol, the guard, couldn't believe this 17-year-old could smile like that. Rasheed was even surprised himself that he liked Siana so much. He wanted to feed her tasty food every day and hold her and pet her when she yawned. His Highness wanted to take her for walks whenever he got bored. Hearing all that, Sol realized the prince thought Siana was a squirrel and knew he was officially losing it. That's when it hit him. Would His Highness even let Siana go if she wanted to leave the palace? I mean, she used to be a princess, and being a maid is probably going to get old for her sooner or later. So, Sol needed to know, if she asked to leave, would the prince just let her walk without a second thought? Rasheed glanced at his pets and declared he takes care of them, protects them, but he never forces them to stay. They're free to leave him anytime. So, if Siana wants out, His Highness wouldn't hold her back. Knowing Rasheed might have a rough time later, Sol chimed in that Siana's got no ties back home. Plus, she's happy being a maid and she's already moving up in the world. So, unless something major changes, that girl's probably gonna stick around. Unless someone shows up out of nowhere and suddenly she gets the princess itch again. Word on the street was, a big shot delegate from the mystical upper crust had arrived for His Highness. Meanwhile, Siana's brain was working overtime, figuring out accessories that would hide her identity and help her blend in. The twins and Aris were practically begging Siana to let them tag along, but she went to the fitting alone, to a shop that didn't even have a sign. That meant it was a secret shop, one that was seriously discreet about its customers. Stepping inside, Siana was a little blown away. It looked like an empress's walk-in closet. The saleswoman noticed this customer didn't exactly scream aristocrat, but wasn't exactly a commoner either. Siana felt a little awkward, but turning back wasn't an option anymore. Besides, they had some seriously exquisite designs here, maybe even with some hidden meaning. Then Siana asked them to put together a dress, accessories, the whole shebang. She's looking at spending around 10,000 gold coins. Seeing how surprised the clerk was, Siana assured her the money wasn't stolen or fake. She even offered to pay up front, but the salesgirl told her not to worry about it. Then, Siana asked them to get a silk dress, something that screams elegance and luxury. For a necklace, she wanted white pearls with a century-old diamond. They called in the head designer to put it all together, and he agreed the necklace looked amazing with her skin tone. He also noticed that she clearly knew her stuff when it came to this kind of thing. The designer and the clerk figured this girl was from some noble family, so they couldn't afford to screw things up. The saleswoman suddenly remembered she'd messed up at the beginning and worried it would cause problems. In the end, Siana got herself a whole new outfit and still had cash to spare. So, she asked to take a look at the gift accessories. The girl decided to treat her friends and wanted to see everything they had. Sol, the guard, got the first gift, even teared up, thought he didn't deserve it. But Siana told him not to feel obligated, saying she bought it with leftover cash. Siana picked out presents for all the people she cared about and her awesome co-workers. Princess Eris was a little surprised, but grateful for the thought. Choo-Choo was totally touched, didn't know how to thank her friend for the little trinket. Siana also got something for Lacey, the little artist, and once that was handled, she could get back to dance practice with His Highness. Then Rasheed, with his innocent smile, asked if Siana had a gift for him too. Turns out she didn't get him anything, and he started whining about how she doesn't love him, but that wasn't the real reason. She deliberately didn't buy anything because she thought Rasheed would like something else better. And you could tell from her face that she wasn't gonna spill the beans just yet about what it was gonna be. But His Highness wasn't bummed out at all. On the contrary, he felt kinda stoked. Today was their last dance rehearsal, and Siana told Rasheed to not forget everything he'd learned. But he didn't want her to leave yet and begged her to spend a little more time with him. Siana refused, because the banquet was like 3 days away, and she didn't want to get in the way of the preparations. Plus, she had to get ready herself, and Rasheed hoped she wouldn't turn into someone else. The girl wanted to explain something to him, but just said goodbye until the banquet. Later, that redhead chewed out Karain for talking smack about His Highness, but the dude swore he was trying his hardest to keep up with the etiquette. And Carolina just remembered with a jolt how it all really went down. They went in to see the prince right when they announced the delegate from the magic merchant group. These guys make rare magic stones and deal with some seriously specialized stuff. That's why they're respected by the emperor himself, Rashid's dad. And when they walked in, they were stoked, realizing the rumors about his looks were true. But for some reason, the woman felt like His Highness was hiding something behind that pretty face. Then she introduced herself as Carolina, daughter of the mystic merchants, and greeted the prince. But His Highness didn't even acknowledge the greeting, and you could feel this creepy vibe coming off him. It just confirmed it for the girl. All the handsome guys are jerks. Then, she subtly nudged Kiran to introduce himself too. But the guy had other things on his mind. He couldn't forget that this bloodthirsty prince had destroyed the kingdom of Aslan, Princess Siana's homeland. Because of him, she went missing, so Kiran wasn't exactly thrilled to say hello. Caroline noticed and apologized, explaining that her brother's lady had gone missing, so he was a little out of it. Rashid just glanced at them like they were clowns and wondered what gift they'd brought. He was hoping it might be a bow tie for Chuk Chuk or some sweets for Niam Yam. That's when Sol reminded Rashid that, according to his position, he should engage with the guests. Then the prince guessed that the missing girl must have been so beautiful that the redhead had completely lost it. And he explained that she had a round face with bright eyes and was basically a sweet treat made from top-quality flour. And he lost this girl because of some jerk who couldn't wait to spill blood. But he was gonna find her. He swore to himself he'd never let this woman out of his arms again. Rashid, dripping with sarcasm, said he'd pray the guy's wish came true. Once outside, Carolina told her brother to get lost, maybe even go find a girl. Kiran wasn't planning on doing anything else, convinced he'd find Siana for sure. He prayed she'd just hold on a little longer, and they'd meet again. The next morning, as soon as Siana woke up, the twins offered her breakfast, but she refused, and they got worried that she'd lost her appetite. Iris showed up right then, promising to stick with the maid to the end, and asked why she wasn't eating. Truth was, Siana didn't want the corset squeezing her, plus she wanted to avoid bathroom trips. The twins started getting ready for the preparations, and they planned to start with makeup. While they were getting ready, Eris fell asleep at the table, and they woke her up when everything was set. The second the princess saw how gorgeous her maid had become, she couldn't contain her excitement. But Grace's beauty that day was different. She looked like a sleek black panther. Isaac trailed behind her, confused why she hadn't worn the dress he'd sent. But the princess couldn't wear it because it was too small. Then she snapped at her fiancé, saying he didn't know anything about sizes, and couldn't see that she didn't fit into tiny dresses anymore. Grace used to be a doll, but now she's a different person. She even told Isaac that if he liked the dress so much, he should wear it himself. They both felt awkward around each other now, and the princess suggested they walk around separately. The Earl begged her to forgive him. He just wanted Grace to look like she used to. Carolina spotted the princess and realized the rumors were true. Then she saw a girl who looked like Princess Siana, but it turned out she just had the same hair color. It was Carolina's joke, but Kiran got super bummed out. The girl told her brother not to get his hopes up and to clean himself up, because His Highness is about to show up, and they're potential big money clients, so we can't screw this up. If Kiran messes this up, his sister threatened to lock him away, and he can kiss Siana goodbye forever. The guy figured it was best to play along for now, so his sister would help him find her later. Then, they heard people whispering that His Highness had arrived alone. Rashid addressed the guests from the steps and told them not to worry, his partner would be here soon. And again, the whispers started. Everyone trying to guess who the prince's partner would be. His Highness was losing his mind waiting to see who it'd be. They hadn't seen each other for 3 days, but Siana promised she'd arrive at the banquet, looking the part. She even promised to play the part of a stuck-up, arrogant princess at the banquet. And to make sure no one recognized her, Siana was going to dress completely differently. But Rashid couldn't figure out how she'd hide her kind eyes and sweet, round face. Soon, His Highness spotted a girl in a stunning dress with wavy hair flowing down her back. Rashid only realized it was Siana when she announced it was an honor to be with the prince tonight. The girl stepped closer to the guests, stood before His Highness, and introduced herself as Rosanna. Then, a pleasant melody started, getting the event guests ready to dance. Rashid grabbed Siana's hand, still not believing she could pull something like this off. Her dress completely hid her true status, and her face was hidden under all that makeup. The girl realized the makeup looked so good, because she'd gotten used to it back when she was a puppet. But this was the first time she'd worn it since then, and that wasn't even what was bothering her right now. Siana noticed the prince was dancing way better than he had on the last day of rehearsals. Rashid explained that he'd been practicing like she asked, but she never thought he'd actually do it. She couldn't help but laugh when she found out Sul helped him. She even tried to picture it. But since the prince had actually listened to her, Siana promised to show him something special. The dance usually ends with a bow to each other, but she decided to make an exception tonight. And just for His Highness, Siana gave him a hug. That totally made his day, and seizing the opportunity, he dipped her and laid one on her, just to make the moment unforgettable. Later, Prince got approached by Count Harrington, who reminded him about visiting before the battlefield. And as a welcome back gift, the Count sent him a little something. Rashid didn't remember getting anything, but Siana noticed there was Harrington wine. Looks like the guests are about to have a pretty good time. Siana knew His Highness wasn't exactly thrilled about schmoozing with the other nobles, so she decided to mingle herself, hiding her face behind a fan. She strolled over to Lady Reinhard and started chatting about her long journey. People started whispering that Rosanna seemed stuck up and arrogant, but followed etiquette to the letter. They also couldn't figure out how she knew so much about the guests. When answering questions, the girl didn't reveal anything personal besides her name. Also, some guests noticed that Rosanna and His Highness looked great together. Someone wanted to see that couple again, but under calmer circumstances. Plus, the guests were really surprised at how actively His Highness praised his companion. The girl hoped the banquet would end without a hitch, when suddenly she heard a familiar voice. It was Kieran's voice, the kid who often visited her kingdom because of the magic-loving new queen. Back then, that boy always stood up for the princess, and now it seemed to him that he knew this beauty in the red dress. Sian wanted to confess, but she couldn't reveal her identity right now, and stated they didn't know each other. She was sure Kieran wouldn't figure her out, because her current face was different from her real appearance. That's when Carolina chimed in, saying her brother was losing it because his friend went missing. After that, the dude just stormed off, totally bummed out. And Siana realized they were talking about her, because Kieran always looked out for her. Now it's eating her up inside, having to fake it around him like this. A little later, Carolina and her brother headed for the exit, but Kieran kept glancing back at Siana. Something was telling him she wasn't leveling with him. Then, he reminded his sister that she promised to help him find Siana after the banquet. He added that he'd been on his best behavior, just like she wanted, smiling politely at all the stuck-up nobles. Carolina agreed, saying her brother was more compliant than usual, and it really paid off. Once she agreed to help, Kieran started asking about the girl who arrived with His Highness. He was dying to know more about this woman. He could see she had a different face and a totally different vibe, but something was bugging him. Kieran was completely hooked by the way this beauty looked at him. Now, thinking back on that look, Kieran was reminded of the princess's face, the one he saw as a kid and could never forget.